You know, I'm just going to conveniently ignore that I had this team ranked 5th last year. Yeah. Welcome in, everybody, to the reveal of the number 29 team in my power rankings heading into the 2025 NFL season, as today we are taking a deep dive into the New York Jets. And Jets fans are back, unfortunately, in familiar territory. A new quarterback, a new coach, and a whole lot of telling yourself that things are going to be different this time. Well, I can't sit here with any certainty and tell you that things are going to be differently this time, especially after I tried to do that in the Aaron Rodgers era, and it went horrible for me. But I am more than happy to go through this new coaching staff, through the roster here today, and discuss where their strengths and weaknesses lie, and what we might have to look forward to on this team, not just for 2025, but beyond as well. Because let's be honest, this is a retooling transition, maybe even full-on rebuild here for this next era of Jets football in New York / New Jersey. As we get started here, if you could do me a huge favor, take just a second to hit that like button down below. It's a free and easy thing that really does help me out. It tells YouTube to push this video out to other Jets fans and NFL diehards just like you. Of course, make sure you're subscribed as well so you don't miss any of our deep dives throughout this summer. And lastly, make sure you stick around to the end of the video. We have a sensational guest here today. The one and only ConnorJRogers will be joining the show to talk some Jets with us. Had just a blast talking with Connor, and I can't wait to share that interview with you guys as well. But without further ado, let's get started. As always, taking a look at the team's offseason, where they got better, where they got worse, going position by position here, and starting with the coaching staff as well, which is, I do say, upgraded with the coaching staff as Aaron Glenn comes in with Tanner Engstrand, the offensive coordinator, both guys coming over from Detroit, and then Steve Wilks as well is going to join the staff, a very much veteran, experienced defensive mind that has been seemingly everywhere in the NFL, replacing, of course, Robert Saleh, who was fired early last season, Jeff Ulbrich, and Nathaniel Hackett. That's the core reason I say upgraded here, is that I think Aaron Glenn can be a better defensive mind and overall head coach than Robert Saleh. He's going to have to prove that, but it's probably close to a push there. Where I do think it is tremendously upgraded is the offensive coaching, where Nathaniel Hackett was just a yes man for Aaron Rodgers. You can debate how good Aaron Rodgers was as a quarterback for this team last year, but I think the biggest strain and drag on this organization that Rodgers brought was the sort of offensive infrastructure that came with Aaron Rodgers, him wanting to run the offense his own way and basically commanding that Nate Hackett be the de facto offensive coordinator here. It was, I would say, inarguably the most dysfunctional offensive coaching room in the league last year. So just to have a normal look at things here with Tanner Engstrand, and not noted there, but also Scott Turner is going to come in and help Tanner as a first-time play caller as well. I think at least the offensive coaching should be better. And then, yeah, the hope is going from Robert Saleh to Aaron Glenn will be an upgrade. I think it's certainly possible. First-year head coach Aaron Glenn, we'll have plenty more to talk about him when we get to the coaching segment of this video. But as we go through the roster here at quarterback, I do say downgraded. It's almost become a sensitive discussion to debate Aaron Rodgers and his play at his age and with this Jets team. I will say this, the level of quarterback play that they got from Aaron Rodgers on the football field, detached from everything we mentioned with the strain that his presence brought to this organization, Rodgers probably played like somewhere between the 18th and 24th best quarterback in the league last year. And that's unpopular to say that. He got all of the heat for the Jets' failures last year. I understand that, but if we're peeling back the layers of the onion here and analyzing if Justin Fields can play better than the raw level of quarterbacking that Rodgers brought to the field, that to me is a downgrade based on everything we've seen from Justin Fields to this point. Even if you say the overall operation will feel better and be upgraded potentially. And I'll just leave it there and let you guys debate that in the comments, because you could make an argument that these two quarterbacks right here, Aaron Rodgers and Justin Fields, over the last 2 years have been maybe the most polarizing, debated quarterbacks in terms of what their level of play is and has been. But then at running back, really staying neutral. They're running it back with the same group there. At tight end, they are going to say goodbye to Tyler Conklin, who ate up 3/4 of their snaps last season, but they spend that high second-round pick on Mason Taylor, Jets legend Jason Taylor's son. I think there's a lot of excitement for him coming in, along with Stone Smart over from the Chargers as well. I like the Taylor pick. I'm optimistic for his future, and I'm excited to talk about him when we get into the roster breakdown. But do I think he'll step in and immediately be better than what Tyler Conklin gave them? That's probably unlikely for what he was as a prospect, but possible. But I left it at neutral for tight end. At wide receiver, I think you have to say downgraded here. Devontae Adams comes in and played pretty well. Mike Williams as well was a part of the team last year. He was not so much playing well for them in 28% of their snaps. But it's not like they really did anything to address this wide receiver room. They reunite this Detroit staff with Josh Reynolds, and then they draft the speedy Arian Smith, who can't catch a football, in the 4th round. So I don't think there's going to be disagreement on that side of things, that this room is downgraded for now. And then on the offensive line, similar to what we said about Mason Taylor stepping in and being better than the veteran presence immediately not being a guarantee, I'm going to leave offensive line neutral here as well. I love the Armin Membu pick. Gives them a ton of upside and youth at that right tackle position, but Morgan Moses is still a pretty good football player. Those are decently large shoes to fill for Membu to come in and say it's going to be an upgrade here in year one, even if I love the process and the draft pick. And then they get some extra depth at center as well in Josh Myers. So from a roster perspective, offensively, it is a little worse off than where they were last year. And then you go to the defensive side of things, and it wasn't a big offseason in terms of adding talent there either. They're kind of resetting things, a bit of a youth movement with this new regime here, I think, in many ways. But you start with the interior of the defensive line. I do say slightly downgraded there. You lose Javon Kinlaw, you lose Solomon Thomas. It's not like those guys gave them too much. I do think Kinlaw gave them something from a pass rushing presence. Washington obviously agrees. They gave him $45 million to pressure the quarterback. It's not a loss you're panicking about, but when your answers to replace those guys are Derek Nadi, Jay Tufele, and Byron Cowart, basically all on veteran minimum contracts, it's still going to be slightly downgraded, even if you're not terrified of the losses there with Kinlaw and Thomas. At edge, you have to say upgraded, however. They do lose Hassan Reddick, who eventually got on the field for them, unmotivated and just not good when he stepped on the field. Not really a loss from the Jets' perspective there, but the big addition really is getting Jermaine Johnson back. He went down midway through that week 2 game against Tennessee, tallying just 8% of the team's total snaps on the season, and his absence was really felt along that defensive line last season. So they're excited to get him back. He is coming off an Achilles tear, so we're going to have some conversations about just how much he is going to be back this year. They're hoping plenty of time to recover, though, that he will be Jermaine Johnson yet again in all his glory. And then they did draft Tyler Barron in the 5th round, much less noteworthy there, but again, upgraded in that edge group compared to what they got to work with last season. At linebacker, saying neutral, CJ Mosley is no longer on the roster. He just could never really stay healthy at this stage in his career. That happened again last year, played just 10% of their snaps, so hardly something they're going to feel the loss of. They did draft Francisco Mauigoa in the 5th round, kind of a developmental option there, but this is really about them re-signing Jamian Sherwood and retaining their 2 starters from last year and staying neutral at a room that they feel good about. But then at cornerback, this group is also going to be downgraded here. They lose DJ Reed, who was really good for them yet again. And they also lose Brandon Echols, who ate up some decent snaps as a backup for them last year. And then they make the decision to spend a pretty decent sized 3-year, like $36 million contract on Brandon Stephens after a brutal year in Baltimore. Frankly, that was one of the head scratching signings of this offseason, in my opinion. And then they do spend a 3rd-round pick on Azariah Thomas, a press man corner that fits their system. I don't know how much we see from him in year 1 with how much they paid Brandon Stephens. But yeah, downgraded, going from, one of the better, if not the best CB2s in the league to now inviting some pretty major question marks, frankly, into that CB2 spot. And then at safety, I did say slightly upgraded here. They're losing a bunch of snaps from last season, but nothing to worry about, right? Chuck Clark, Jalen Mills, Ashton Davis. Yeah, whatever. We'll see out the door. No problem. They bring in Andre Sisco on kind of a 1-year prove-it deal in free agency. Fair enough signing. And then I love the Malachi Moore pick in the 4th round. These aren't major additions enough to say this is a largely upgraded safety room, but I do think they're better off with those 2 guys that they brought in. And then with the special teams, they eventually moved on from Greg Zuerlein, who was horrible for this team. But then their solution was Anders Carlson midseason. They're sticking with him for some reason. And then they are moving on from veteran punter Thomas Morstead and going with the very unproven Austin McNamara, who is, I guess, technically a rookie. Like, he hasn't played any snaps yet, but he came out of college, I think, after the 2023 season. So I don't know if he gets the rookie tag or not, to be honest. But that is their current solution at punter. I'm just leaving it at neutral, though, because Zuerlein and Morstead struggled for them last year. It's going to be tough for the younger guys to be worse than them. And there is your offseason recap. Obviously, like I said, it's a youth movement here. It's a reset to try and find what the new core of this Aaron Glenn-led Jets team is going to be. And that's a good transition to break down this new coaching staff, how they stack up against the rest of the league, and then talk about what this team's going to look like schematically speaking on both sides of the ball. And I like the Aaron Glenn hire, but I will be honest about it. I'm not prepared to say that I love the Aaron Glenn hire, but I will give him this. He has absolutely earned the bid to be a head coach in the NFL with what he's done in Detroit. And I almost think you also have to look at the Jets and kind of grade their head coach hire on a curve, because they're kind of coming from behind or being against the 8 ball a little bit, in the sense that this building, this organization, and this culture is ablaze right now, and they need somebody that can come in and put out the fire. Like, you can see it on the screen right there, that overall coach and culture grade that I give these teams, that sort of assessment of the team chemistry and the locker room culture and the cohesiveness in the locker room to put together a game plan to win football games. It's a resounding F for the New York Jets right now. And Aaron Glenn comes in with his hands full to just get this team back to neutral and come together as a football team after not just what happened with Aaron Rodgers and Robert Saleh and everything that led to this, but what the organization was and has been even before that, right? Like, the Jets are the opposite of having earned the benefit of the doubt for that assessment there. But what Aaron Glenn certainly does bring to the table is a hard-ass mentality, a culture-building mindset, and being someone that is relatable to the players. And if you're looking for the right candidate to come in and just fix the culture, I understand why they gravitated towards Aaron Glenn, who is a previous member of the New York Jets himself. And that is ultimately why I do like the hire of Aaron Glenn here. But I do obviously have some hesitations here. I've said it before, and I'll say it time and time again. I do just prefer teams to go with the offensive-minded head coach. Not only because you run the risk of losing any good offensive coordinator that you might stumble upon the second he proves his worth as a head coach candidate, and you're just setting yourself up for more long-term success if you have that mainstay offensive-minded head coach that you can't lose any 2 or 3 years. But it's not just the risk of losing any good offensive mind that you might have. you also are passing up on the opportunity with that head coach vacancy to go and pluck any potential premium offensive minds that might be available. And I think the biggest cheat code an organization can have is to find a Sean McVay, Matt LaFleur, Kevin O'Connell type of coach that can lift up your offense in this offensive league. So there's a bit of a opportunity cost or cost benefit analysis that needs to be done anytime you go with the defensive minded head coach. But another reason I prefer leaning away from the defensive minded head coach is that because everybody's looking for offensive minded coaches, the pool of really good defensive coordinators out there is large. And I think it's borderline easy right now you've got like just this hiring cycle, the Dennis Allens and Matt Eberflus's of the world who, weren't great head coaches because they did have a ceiling as a defensive-minded head coach, but they are awesome defensive coordinators. The Steve Spagnuolos, Vic Fangios, Robert Saleh is now going to go be a defensive coordinator for the Niners. Like, there are a lot more guys that you can pluck as your defensive coordinator that frankly will never get poached because a lot of them are failed head coaches. And I just think if you're following the value, you grab the offensive minded coach and you settle in with a defensive coordinator like that. But if you are going to hire a defensive head coach, to me, he better be a DeMeco Ryans, a Mike McDonald, someone that you really view as one of the premium defensive minds in the NFL. And do I honestly view Aaron Glenn as a premium defensive mind? No, I don't. I frankly wouldn't have ranked him in the top half of defensive coordinators coming out of last season. Now, again, there's a lot of depth of defensive coordinators. That does not mean he's a bad defensive coordinator by any stretch of the imagination, but that further makes all of the points I'm trying to make here. So I don't want to stay overly negative with this discussion. Again, I like the hire for all of the things we said about restoring the culture here. And I think his ability to relate to these players and get buy-in from someone like Sauce Gardner and Garrett Wilson, who are a little bit tapped out right now coming out of the previous regime, there is a lot of reason to this hire. But I do have my reservations. If you look at the, defensive coaching rankings that we do for this series here, they're not bad, of course, but they're not great, for the pass defense coaching. Right now, I have the Jets ranking 22nd to 27th with a respectable B- grade. But I will say that is especially where I want to see more from Aaron Glenn and have some reservations here. I think with his very aggressive, attacking, multiple front, cover one, press man system, when he's got the right players for it and things are working, he showed in 2023 and early in 2024 before injuries stacked up that he can get things rolling and dial up blitzes and coach up his DBs to play press man coverage really well, being that former defensive backs coach. Like he can coach that style of defense really well. I don't have any questions about that. But I do think what we've seen in Detroit is really a lack of ability to pivot. They are a live by the sword, die by the sword defense, or have been. And you haven't really seen Detroit be able to shift into more of a zone-oriented system or play more too high coverage consistently and really adjust to the fact that they had this soaring offense. They didn't need to be a shutdown aggressive defense. They needed to adjust and not let the Commanders score 45 on them in the playoffs. And they weren't able to do that, for example. And as it relates to Aaron Glenn, every great defensive coordinator in the league is flexible like that. And I don't know that Aaron Glenn can be flexible with what he wants to do. I would love for him to prove that here with the Jets. Now, when it comes to run defense coaching, I think everything he does stylistically will work with this Jets team, and it's going to be a breath of fresh air for the Jets. You are going to see much heavier boxes, more linebackers and defensive linemen inside the tackles, and the Lions defense has been one of the best run defenses in the league over the last 2 seasons, and I do not think that's a mistake. So for run defense coaching, they do come in as a new staff here, really highly ranking. 10th to 14th with a B+ grade is really a good ranking. Again, there's a lot of good defensive coaches out there in the league right now. And I think how Aaron Glenn stops the run and gets you into those, long down and distance passing situations is something to get excited about with this new Jets regime. Now he does bring in Steve Wilks, a very established long-term defensive coordinator, even a former head coach. And not that Aaron Glenn needs a mentor, but just a really experienced body to have in the room there with you. And someone that does bring a little bit more of a zone defensive background, really spending so much time with Lovie Smith and Ron Rivera. I mean, you think of the Lovie Smith being in that kind of Tampa 2 tree, and then Ron Rivera, very kind of zone-oriented system as well. So I like having that other voice in the building. It's not like Steve Wilks is like tightly attached to Aaron Glenn in terms of this being some hire who you know type of deal. I'm sure they've interacted and know each other, but I do like kind of having a opposite-minded defensive philosophy in the room there with you. And if you talk about wanting the Jets to be a little bit more multiple from a coverage and scheme perspective than what Aaron Glenn showed to do in Detroit, I think Steve Wilks gives you some of that extra hope too. So I like that hire quite a bit. But then you go to the offensive side of this, and this is going to be Tanner Engstrand's first real big opportunity here as the offensive coordinator. Honestly, this was huge to be able to bring him with you if you're Aaron Glenn. I assumed he was going to be the one promoted in Detroit, and I would love some feedback from people how that kind of played out, because with Ben Johnson leaving Detroit, I think everybody thought Tanner Engstrand would just get the promotion, but then Detroit actually goes externally and brings in Morton from Denver. So that was kind of fascinating. I don't want to call it a red flag, but fascinating to say the least. But Engstrand has been learning under Dan Campbell and Ben Johnson, obviously, who's been arguably the most brilliant play caller in football for the last 2 years. And if he can get 80% of Ben Johnson's genius leaking into what he's learned from him, the Jets got themselves a good hire here, and certainly a name that has a lot of potential, not just with this Jets team, but to be that offensive coordinator that unfortunately the Jets might have to lose in 2 or 3 years if things go well here. But definitely a big name by offensive coordinator standards here. And I think expectations should be pretty high. Now, there has to be some pump the brakes with it as well. He's never called plays before, and he's coming in to a Jets organization that has everybody's got to figure this thing out, right? So if you look at the rankings, C grade for pass game coaching, a C grade for run game coaching, going to be near the bottom of the league there, right? 30th to 31st for pass game coaching, 28th to 32nd for run game coaching. Engstrand absolutely has to prove himself as the offensive coordinator here, but the excitement comes with the idea that this is a very rational hire and someone that was on the radar to be one of these ascending minds. In other words, there is no reason for hesitation here. He just has to prove himself. As far as what this system looks like, though, or at least what it looked like in Detroit, I would describe it as a modern, multiple pro-style offense. A lot of under-center offense, just a very diverse run game. You could still feel the kind of Sean Payton roots of it all with Dan Campbell, being in that Sean Payton dynasty, really. Just known for varying their runs from duo to outside zone to counter to power to outside tosses and getting a variety of different playmakers involved. I mean, what Detroit has done with their early down offense has been a spectacle to watch. any given player can get the ball going in any given direction with any number of lead blockers at any moment in time. And it has been a true handful for opposing defenses to deal with. And it would be a shame if Tanner Engstrand didn't take some of those influences, drop them into New York here, especially with the threat of a Justin Fields in the design run game that I feel like is going to be a major aspect of what they want to do. So just expect a lot of creativity. Expect that not everything's going to work as well. Even in Detroit, they would try stuff, and it was like, yeah, that was probably a little bit too much to put on the plate of our blockers or the running back in motion or whatever it might be. But early down, expect a lot of pre-snap motion, a lot of misdirection, and really a extremely diverse play set of run calls and play action off of the misdirection and pre-snap, and play fakes, obviously. But as far as the drop back passing game goes, once you get to third and long, pretty much every NFL passing game is mostly the same anyway. But it is worth noting just how effective Detroit has been at utilizing kind of slot weapons to attack the intermediate part of the field and trying to mix up your punches. And really, once they got Sam Laporta, this got fully unlocked, where you're almost running a two-man game with your tight end and your slot wide receiver. If it's 3rd and 11, you have one guy running a shorter, probably stop route or drag, and then the other guy running a dig behind that guy. So often that dig route was Amon-Ra St. Brown, but you see the linebackers getting sucked in by that athletic tight end that's a threat to convert the chains, and then you have all this space in the intermediate part of the field for that in-breaking dig route. That felt like the core back-breaking aspect of the Detroit Lions passing game that obviously featured so much more than just that. But I will say I expect with Mason Taylor coming in, them to use Garrett Wilson in the slot quite a bit, at least for now, in that role. Garrett Wilson, who is very good at dig routes, and Mason Taylor to play that same kind of two-man game that Laporta and St. Brown were so good at. But that concludes our coach and scheme breakdown here for the Jets. Again, I like the Aaron Glenn hire. I am absolutely pulling for him. I think he had established himself, especially with what he's going to bring to the table for this culture and the locker room to relate to these players. He had established himself as a very qualified head coach candidate, and I like the hire. I just also at the same time don't want to oversell things here and say this is a can't-miss hire. I think there are some hesitations with just how high-end of a defensive mind Aaron Glenn is. And if things do fail here, I'm not going to be overly surprised because it is the Jets we're talking about here. And I don't think this was some A-plus Grand Slam hire either. It was a hire that I liked, didn't necessarily love. But with that, let's now get into this roster where we start with the quarterback room. And now for the third offseason in a row, we talk about Justin Fields and how much hope we might have that he can figure things out. And now on the third team in as many years. But look, honestly, this conversation has become very simple for me, and it's been a result of going at it with this massive wave of Justin Fields fans that have followed him from Ohio State through the Chicago Bears that still believe Justin Fields is going to figure everything out and reach this theoretical upside as this incredible quarterback. But really, by the end of that 2023 season in Chicago, before they drafted Caleb Williams, I had really reached a point with Justin Fields where I felt comfortable with who he is as a player and have stopped assuming that the game is going to speed up for him, because that is the core issue with Justin Fields. It was his issue at Ohio State. It was his issue in Chicago. And even if he showed some improvements in Pittsburgh last year, taking better care of the football, even getting to some second read throws, a little bit better than maybe he did in Chicago, though not a lot better. Whatever way you want to look at his game, everything has felt too fast for Justin Fields. Whether it's his processing, where I think he not only does he stare down first reads and is often very late to get to second reads if he gets to them at all, but even in terms of like wanting a quarterback that can throw with anticipation, throw into a zone window, or let the ball go before a receiver begins his break, that even has been lacking with Justin Fields. But it's not just the processing side of things. I think he is also slow to kind of feel the decomposition of the pocket and manage the rush. He's often late to react and taking bad sacks. I think his pocket presence is generally some of the worst in the league, and that oftentimes reduces his ability to tap into his scrambling ability because he's not always able to find the right escape lanes, or sometimes he thinks there's an escape lane and he just didn't feel the pocket out. And even all the way down to just like the basic operations of things, his release and just getting the ball out to a guy in the flat on a bubble screen, even that has felt slow for Justin Fields. So for a guy that is just praised for speed in his legs, the reality is the way he sees the game, how quickly he's able to get rid of the ball, everything is exceptionally slow in reality. And as he's churned through different coordinators and different receivers, we just haven't seen that development. And it goes back to him at Ohio State. It's something that I am no longer counting on or attaching myself to the hope that that's going to come along, even though there is this group of fans out there that think that version of Justin Fields exists somewhere. And look, if you're a Jets fan or you're a big Fields fan and that's what gives you joy is the theoretical upside of Justin Fields, and you want to keep watching him and praying for that, more power to you. But really what I'm getting at here with Justin Fields is I look at him as a very low-end starting caliber quarterback, a fringe starter, if you will, someone that can really lift the upside of your run game if you want to lean into that side of things, use him as a designed threat on early downs and change the numbers in the run game. And then someone that has to play a very simplified, kind of dumbed down version of a passing quarterback, which is exactly what the Steelers asked of him last year. It was play action shot plays. It was running the ball on early downs. And then on third down, it's okay, if it's there, throw it. If not, take off and run. What we can't have you do is turning the football over and actively hurting the team. And I do think that is where Fields took the biggest step forward overall in his game, if you will, even though I don't know that too much changed in how good he actually is. I think the main difference is the Steelers, unlike the Bears, leaned into who Justin Fields is as this kind of bridge quarterback. The Steelers really leaned into everything I'm saying, whereas the Bears still attached themselves to hope, right? They asked him to go through progressions and make challenging throws from the pocket and kind of elevate the offense and try to prove what he can do. And the growth just never really came there. And I think for the Jets, you look at the contract they gave him, it is the Gardner Minshew contract adjusted for league inflation and a little bit of extra money attached to the first round draft pedigree. Gardner Minshew got about 2 years, $25 million a year ago. Justin Fields gets 2 years, $40 million here for the Jets. And I think everything the Jets have told us they want to do, which is be a run-first offense, and also just not drafting a quarterback early in this draft, tells you they want him to come in. They want to do what the Steelers did, lean into who he is, what his strengths are, the QB run game especially, and get through a year, a transition season, and very likely be considering a quarterback next season. And if that little glimmer of hope, that 1% chance that the speed of the game all of a sudden isn't too much for Justin Fields, if something clicks there, fantastic. That's a dream scenario. But I think attaching yourself to that hope at this point is a lost cause. And I think most people have come around to this perception of what and who Justin Fields is as a quarterback. And honestly, I think that's a good process for the New York Jets to take a reset year, to lean into the run game, not overcommit to a young quarterback in a lesser draft class and put him in a compromising situation out the gate, and set yourself up for future success. So ultimately, as someone that has pushed back on the Justin Fields hype now for a long time, I'm at a point now where, like, I like the signing. I like the process, and I think he's going to be able to do what they ask him to do, which is not very much for this Jets team. But I think he gets through the year as the starter and is fun to watch for what he is, and will allow this team to not just do what they want to do, but get an evaluation of the roster. Evaluate the defense because they won't be on the field constantly, because I think the run game is going to be pretty good, and get an evaluation of this offensive line, at least in the run game side of things. So as far as ranking the Jets, they come in 28th for overall quarterback. Now, that is 31st in passing, but being top 5, ranking 3rd to 5th with that QB run multiplier, that's how you can get from 31st to 28th for the overall quarterback ranking. As far as the backups are concerned, Tyrod Taylor still hanging around here as one of the best backups in the league. Stylistically, I think he can do really everything Justin Fields can do in the design run game, as long as Tyrod can stay healthy, which has been an issue for him. I do think you could probably run a more diverse playbook in terms of passing concepts with Tyrod Taylor, but he also just doesn't have the cannon arm that a Justin Fields does, and isn't quite as good as a play extender as well. So they do come out pretty damn similar with the passing grade, but you are protected if anything were to happen to Justin Fields. I think you can continue with the plan and not be thrown off of it really at all. They did pick up Adrian Martinez from the XFL, who was running everywhere against XFL competition. So same idea, like very clear. They want rushing threats in this QB room. They got another one in Adrian Martinez. And then they got Brady Cook as an undrafted pickup as well. So there's your quarterback room. And I will say, as we transition to this group of weapons, there's almost a poetic beauty to this, reuniting Garrett Wilson with Justin Fields. And as you see here, the group of weapons here ranks 30th in the league with a C grade. It's not a large, diverse group of weapons here. But not only reuniting Garrett Wilson with Justin Fields, but building this team out in this first year of this new era with a full understanding of who Justin Fields is as a passer. I joked about this with Bears fans, but it really stopped being a joke once we saw Darnell Mooney go to Atlanta as a wide receiver too and immediately have success again. But I always tried to tell Bears fans, like, hey, like, you're making all these excuses that Justin Fields has no one to throw to. Well, you turn on the tape and Darnell Mooney's open. He's there to look at. And Justin Fields literally was either throwing the ball to DJ Moore once they brought him in 2023, or not finding any other option on the play. Justin Fields is a true first read quarterback. Darnell Mooney is the most damning piece of evidence for that. So why invest in a wide receiver 2 this season if Justin Fields isn't going to look at him? And then make sure that his number 1 wide receiver is, I don't know, the superstar college wide receiver that maybe overinflated his draft stock to begin with, in Garrett Wilson. So the chemistry is there, not just because they've worked together, but the chemistry is there because Garrett Wilson is going to get fed within this offense. And if he ends up leading the league in targets this season, I really wouldn't be that surprised. I don't know if the Jets are going to pass enough overall for that to happen, but man, he's going to get peppered with targets here. And there's going to be some moments where that works, but obviously it reaches a point in time where you do want to be able to go elsewhere in the passing game. And that's where that C grade comes in with this Jets team, ranking 30th for weapons in the league. It's really just a one-man room and a one-man conversation here. But I do still put the up arrow on Garrett Wilson. And I'm excited to see this, man, because he comes in his rookie season with Zach Wilson and whatever other quarterbacks ended up getting out there that season. Like, what was it? Like Chris Streveler was starting games, like just the worst QB play you could imagine. And Garrett Wilson still wins Offensive Rookie of the Year. But then 2023 happens. You're excited to see him take that next step with Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers' Achilles pops on the 4th snap of the first game of the season. And then last year, I think the chemistry with Wilson and Rodgers, which is very demanding of a young wide receiver to have all of the right checks and perfect chemistry with Aaron Rodgers, it was like half there, I would say, in the first 6 weeks of the season. There was some good, some bad. There was times where Rodgers would throw the ball his way and Wilson wasn't looking for it. Just missing some of those checks and all of the different hand motions and stuff that Rodgers does. Just didn't all come together right away with Wilson. And then before they could really kind of get that up to 100% chemistry, they just bring in Devontae Adams to be that chemistry guy by like week 7. So what I'm saying is we haven't really gotten the opportunity to see Garrett Wilson at his full capacity. He is 24 years old. And even this season, you know, Justin Fields has his deficiencies as a passer, but it is a pretty good world to live in to be Justin Fields' number 1 wide receiver. Just ask DJ Moore. It might not be great for everybody else and for the offense at large, but I do think we're going to see a lot of volume and some pretty exciting moments for Garrett Wilson this year, he brings everything to the table as a wide receiver. I've always been a huge fan of Garrett Wilson. I went on the record in that draft and said the Jags should have just taken Garrett Wilson with the number 1 pick that year when there wasn't a clear-cut best number 1 player. And I do still think he has the upside with his route running, some of the spectacular catches he makes. He is super savvy and elusive after the catch. He does everything as a wide receiver. He still, to me, has the upside to be a elite alpha, like dominant number 1 wide receiver in the league. And I'm not quite ready to give up on that yet because, you know, like I said, the circumstances just haven't quite lined up. So that alone is like saving this room and is the reason there's still like a competent C grade here, because everything else here is horrible. I mean, Josh Reynolds is going to come in as their number 2 wide receiver. And Josh Reynolds is fine as like a wide receiver 4 or as a perimeter starter if you also have like a really good tight end or pass catching back. Like he should at best be the 4th most targeted player in your offense, not your number 2 wide receiver on paper. He's a big-bodied guy. He can win contested catches, but he does have drop issues. He doesn't really separate or take the top off the defense. In fact, I would say he's pretty damn redundant with Allen Lazard. He's just a better version of that bigger-bodied receiver than Allen Lazard. But he's a total placeholder Band-Aid starter for them for now. Not expecting much from him really at all. And then Allen Lazard, I mean, it's been a meme on this channel how little I think of Lazard. I will give him a little bit of credit. He had some good games last year. When he does have Aaron Rodgers as his quarterback, he seems to play okay as like a wide receiver 3B, maybe. But yet again, he's towards the top of the league last year in drops. And the infuriating thing about Allen Lazard is he's not fast. He's not a separator at all, really, but he is 6'5" and he's big and he's on the field because at times he's a good run blocker. But for such a big target, he is mediocre in terms of contested catch win rate, and the drops are just not what you expect for a big target like him. So he's infuriating. If you're a Jets fan, you're just hoping that some of these other guys can play well enough that you take Lazard off the field by season's end. I think I spit out my drink when I saw that they were like entertaining trade offers for Allen Lazard. I'm like, you're out of your mind if you think anybody is going to give you anything to take on this Allen Lazard contract. But he is still hanging around here. Again, the hope is Malachi Corley, Arian Smith especially can figure things out and get on the field, because both of these guys have physical talent and upside for what they do, but they've got to prove that they basically have the skill and hands, frankly, to be NFL players, especially Arian Smith, who's drafted in the 4th round here. He's fascinating. I'll give him that. because he has blazing speed. He's actually a good route runner. That's what's interesting about him. He's not just this track guy that they had running go balls. He actually runs double moves and creates outstanding separation. But he dropped 20% of his targets at Georgia. He was a fifth-year player with all of these traits that never really settled into any sort of consistency. And he's your true vertical threat who can't catch. So can he hit the jugs machine, learn how to track the deep ball, and bring it in? If he can, he's going to be a useful player. We've seen these Lions offenses with Jameson Williams, and before he figured it out, Khalif Raymond. Definitely an offense that wants to take those vertical shots and tap into guys' speed. But if he can't catch the football, that's obviously a problem. And then you have Malachi Corley, who he's very fascinating in that sort of playmaker mold. We discussed how this offense does so many creative things to get talented football players the ball in their hands. Malachi Corley's kind of the poor man's Deebo Samuel idea, where he's kind of half running back, half slot wide receiver, but he does win tough catches, or at least did in college. I'm definitely giving a chance, though, because I kind of knew last year, for a guy that played such a gimmick role in college, it was going to be borderline impossible for him to get on the same page with Aaron Rodgers, who does demand a lot of attention to detail from his wide receivers, as we've talked about. That was always going to be a stretch for him to do much in his rookie season. And then you throw in the fact that he had the moment where he, his best play of the year, he did one of those drops the ball at the 1 yard line and then fumbles it out the back of the end zone, and it's a turnover. The most bonehead move you can make. The football awareness side of things, Malachi Corley has to prove that he has that. But I do think in a offense that's going to lean much more into misdirection and getting the ball in guys' hands, he, to me, like a young Deebo Samuel, if you can just kind of build up that confidence, give him 40 design touches where he doesn't have to think too much, that could be a bridge to him developing more football awareness and more of a well-rounded skill set as a player. But those two guys do have their specific roles, at least what they're good at, but they just have to figure out their complete games as football players before they are really a part of any sort of starting rotation, before they can take Alan Lazard's ass off the field and start to make more of a consistent difference for this Jets team. And then you kind of have an open competition, if at all. I mean, we've seen moments where Detroit didn't even keep that many wide receivers around, so I don't think there's a guarantee that these guys beyond the five we've talked about make the team. Xavier Gipson, I think, has the best chance just as a return man for this team, as their punt returner. He's had very minor flashes as a receiving threat, but he's an undersized, kind of quick guy. But I do like Tyler Johnson is a fascinating signing to me. I think there's a pretty reasonable case to be made that he's the second best separating, route running type wide receiver on this roster right now. And he did do some good stuff for the Rams last season, finally kind of breaking through in the snaps that they gave him. I like Tyler Johnson coming out of Minnesota, but he was another guy that struggled to get on the same page with Tom Brady, getting drafted to that Bucs team, another quarterback that kind of demanded a lot of awareness and understanding of the playbook and being in the right place at the right time and all of that stuff that veteran wide receivers can handle. Tyler Johnson has figured some of that stuff out as he's kind of moved his way through the league. And if he makes this team, I would not be surprised if he starts to kind of earn more and more opportunities and actually becomes a capable contributor to this group. Nothing crazy, but relative to where the rest of these guys are at, I think the opportunity is there. Then it's all undrafted types, Irvin Charles, Brandon Smith, 4 other names there. It's just not a deep group of wide receivers at all. But we can talk about Mason Taylor in the tight end room, second round pick. They are obviously hoping with this Lions regime that he will be their Sam Laporta, who was drafted right around the same spot that Mason Taylor was, that early second round range. And frankly, as prospects, I don't think they're too far off. Now, Sam Laporta shattered his expectations. a lot to ask Mason Taylor to be that guy, but a guy that has like balanced size, not the biggest guy, but also just not like blazing speed or anything like that, but accelerates well, moves really well, a very fluid athlete for the tight end position. That's the closest comparison between Taylor and Laporta, is just the way they can sink their hips and cut and fast feet for the tight end position. And likewise, neither guy great blocking prospects that you hope get better as blockers as their time goes on. It's a reasonable hope that he can be their version of Sam Laporta in this offense. And that's obviously high praise, but I'm not like dismissing that he can do that. And when you factor in everything we've said about the rest of these guys, there's pretty massive opportunities here for Mason Taylor to eat inside this offense. And with Justin Fields, while he's not great at getting to his progressions with the wide receiving group, he does utilize tight ends. He always had an eye for Cole Kmet on dump downs and working to that part in the check down game. So I do think he's going to be someone that Fields can work to throughout his progressions. And ultimately, I get what they see in Mason Taylor and think it was a good pick. He's not a can't miss tight end prospect by any stretch of the imagination. I do think with his youth, with his bloodlines being Jason Taylor's son, there is a lot of room for him to bulk up and be more of a true smashing 3-down tight end. There's a lot of potential in this player, but he just wasn't a guy that was like crazy dynamic in college. He's got great hands. I like the way he adjusts for catches. He's got good body control. I think he flashes good routes, but there's a lot of routes where there's extra steps and there's stuff to clean up in his route running. Just a good, moldable athlete as a second-round caliber tight end prospect. So I do think from a dynasty fantasy football perspective, he is a very good player to target. And even for like best ball drafts, I think there is a world, like you think of that Sam Laporta rookie season, I'm not saying it's definitely going to happen here with the Jets, but if you're doing your best ball drafts and it's the 18th round and you don't know who to draft on Underdog, Mason Taylor is not a bad flyer to make with some upside there that could have some big weeks where he might be catching 7 or 8 passes any given week. So I'm definitely a fan. Excited to see where this goes. Beyond him in that tight end room, Jeremy Ruckert hasn't been able to develop here, projected as a kind of balanced possession tight end coming out of Ohio State. I would say he's been even worse than you would have expected there. He hasn't been as good of a blocker. He hasn't been really stable as a possession tight end at all. So he's in that room. You're hoping for a step forward here in year 3 from him. And then they did bring in Stone Smart. I think after they were able to get Mason Taylor in the draft, Stone's going to take a bit of a back seat there, but an undersized tight end that can create some early separation, I think, as a backup to Mason Taylor inside this offense. They do have Andrew Beck, who's been just kind of a balanced blocking specialist throughout his career. And then Zach Kuntz is still hanging around, the RAS testing god that has not been able to really climb the ladder here in 2 years with the Jets. And then you've got the running backs. You know, I do give Breece Hall a B+ grade. He makes some really dynamic catches down the field, and he is really good in the screen game. He's definitely a contributor to the passing game. I don't think he's a Christian McCaffrey or one of these elite backs that really elevates the passing game, but he gives you everything you could ask for, except he does have a lot of drops on tape. If he could clean up those drops, he does have 1,000 receiving yards combined over the last 2 years. Now, a lot of that is screen production and dump down production, but if he could catch the ball more consistently and maybe get a little bit better and more consistent as a pass blocker, he could be maybe something closer to an Alvin Kamara-esque threat, but that's probably an optimistic projection at this point, especially because in just a minute, I'm actually not that high on Breece Hall's future with this Jets team. But as far as running backs are concerned, he's up there for capable receiving backs. Braylon Allen, you know, solid dump down threat, solid screen threat for such a big back. And then Isaiah Davis is kind of not a great athlete, but a very well-rounded player. So you can kind of throw the ball to whoever's out there any given moment out of the backfield there. But yeah, there's your group of weapons. They rank 30th. They get a C grade. You're hoping in time they can climb the ranks and a Mason Taylor can break out, and they're going to eventually, I think, have to get more wide receivers in the room here, assuming Malachi Corley and Arian Smith don't take those full steps. Maybe they do. But as long as Justin Fields is your quarterback, I don't mind them focusing on other positions right now, knowing that he's really only going to have eyes for the number one wide receiver anyway. But let's talk about this backfield a little bit more. As I alluded to, I'm just not that high on what we've seen from Breece Hall in the last season. And the Jets running back room as a whole actually ranks lower than you might expect, 22nd to 26th with a C+ grade at running back. And this is where I really want to hear from Jets fans if you think I'm crazy. But wow, I was so underwhelmed by what Breece Hall gave this football team last year. And I am legitimately concerned that that injury he suffered in 2023 has slowed him down. I just don't see a lot of juice from Breece Hall in the way that I did with him coming out of Iowa State and the way that we did with him early in his rookie season when he was an offensive rookie of the year candidate with Garrett Wilson here. And a lot of the metrics back this up, by the way. He was just 27th in the NFL in missed tackles forced, 36 missed tackles forced, put him right with the names of Tyler Algier, Brian Robinson, Jalen Warren, DeAndre Swift, capable backs, but not what we expect from Breece Hall based on how we've talked about him for the first 2 years of his career. He also had just 4.2 yards per carry. He had 6 fumbles last season. And many of those fumbles paired with back-breaking drops and gaffes in pass protection, there was a lot missing with Breece Hall from his just general football awareness and not having some of those costly moments that you want to avoid from your running back. So you pair those with some of the lack of juice. There was so many times where it felt like he would get into the second level and he was getting run down in a way that I felt like he didn't always get run down at Iowa State or in his rookie season. And you look at the way they used him last year, kind of the way they've talked about him this offseason, not giving him a contract extension as he heads into a contract year. And I don't know, man, my valuation of Breece Hall isn't that he's a bad player, but it is that he is not the player we talked about him several years ago as this star franchise running back. I view him kind of in that category with guys like maybe a Tyler Algier or Jalen Warren as just a capable starting back. I think his vision's still really good. I think he still has good contact balance. There's stuff to like about him. He's got good size. Again, I don't think he's bad, but with an 80 grade, I don't think he's too much of a difference maker for this run game. And I think we're actually going to see a pretty heavy rotation with especially Braylon Allen and then maybe even a little bit of Isaiah Davis as well. And I would not be the least bit surprised if the Jets kind of let him grind out his fair share of carries this year and then bid farewell and say goodbye. And after that, I wouldn't be surprised if he kind of fell into just kind of a adequate RB2 role. I don't know. Again, I want to hear from Jets fans on this. If I'm just too crazy low on Breece Hall, or if you think I'm onto something here, because it's obviously been a pretty sharp turn for a guy that I projected as a potential top 5 running back heading into last season. I obviously don't feel that way here today, but maybe with an extra year recovered from that injury, he can get that juice back and make me look like a fool for this rating here. And if that happens, great. This is going to be a really dynamic backfield with him and Justin Fields, who, you almost don't need to analyze too much. He is there is no doubt that this is one of the best rushing threats at the quarterback position in the entire league. What he did that was the 2022 season, right? I think did he get 1,000 rushing yards? If not, he stopped just short. I mean, that was up there with one of the best rushing seasons from a quarterback ever. And at that point in time, it actually wouldn't have been crazy if you said he was the best rushing threat at the QB position. Now, I think 2023 and 2024, he didn't quite have those absurd highlight runs that he was able to get in 2022 to say he's the best rushing quarterback in the league. But again, he's up there. This is the plan, to lean into him. Wouldn't be the least bit surprised if he leads the league in QB rushes this season, or at least design QB runs. And he's a difference maker, man. You have to account for him. You have to keep extra defenders in the box. You've got to keep one and sometimes even two defenders on the read option with an eye on him, which opens things up for these backs. He attributes a very significant boost to this Jets run game. And then we kind of mentioned how the backups here are going to allow them to at least strategically do the same thing, whether it's Tyrod Taylor or Adrian Martinez. The only thing that's really left to talk about here are the backup running backs. So we mentioned Braylon Allen. I put the up arrow on him. I was impressed by him in his rookie season. Big 230-pound back, just bursts through arm tackles. He can really get moving if you can get him out in space. But I think he's got like light feet for a big guy. He carries so much of his strength kind of in his upper body. And you love that he will like lean into guys and truck you with that powerful upper body. But he's able to change lanes and tap into some good stuff with his vision because of the lighter feet. And he can kind of sidestep you and make you miss at the second level too. So, I could see a world where by the end of the season, it's kind of hard to see a true difference in talent between what Breece Hall is today and what Braylon Allen is. And the Jets really don't have any issue kind of making Braylon Allen their, call it David Montgomery, as they head into 2026. Maybe look for a little bit more lightning and a different player in the future to be more of that quote unquote Jahmyr Gibbs role. But basically just wouldn't be surprised if Braylon Allen plays well enough where he takes this backfield heading into 2026. And I don't know that that's a perspective that a ton of national pundits have with this backfield. But it's where I'm at with these guys right now and what they showed on tape last year. Isaiah Davis did show some nice stuff last year. He was better than I thought he would be coming out of South Dakota State. I just, when you watch a guy at that level of competition, you want to see more of a difference maker. And I didn't feel like he had too many difference making traits. But dude, honestly, I thought his tape with the Jets in his rookie season was even more impressive than what he did at South Dakota State. He does run with really good burst and commits to his gap and just runs with his hair on fire. I think he can be a really nice complete backup for this team. So he's worth a shout out, and he's probably going to get his fair share of touches, maybe 4 or 5 carries a game, which is only going to make this running back room an even larger nightmare from a fantasy football perspective. I do like to at least discuss the fantasy football angle with these running back rooms. I think it's pretty clear to say I'm staying away from this group almost entirely. I think the one guy I would want is Braylon Allen late. But even then, I do still think Breece Hall is going to get his share of touches, and I don't think Breece Hall is just bad. So I don't see a world where Braylon Allen just overtakes this backfield and he becomes this monster workhorse either. But, that's more of a 2026 conversation for your dynasty leagues. But it really is about those three. Kene Nwangwu is here as a kick returner, and he might be the best kick returner in the league at this point, but not someone from a vision perspective that you want to really give the football to all that much, though they maybe will put him out there for some design touches and stuff because he does have the best speed in this backfield. And then they did bring in Donovan Edwards because why not? As an undrafted pickup, the NCAA 25 cover athlete, had a disappointing season last year. You go back a couple years ago before a knee injury, and he had some juice. There was a lot of like Aaron Jones to his game early in his time at Michigan. Why not bring him in, see if he's, can get healthy and get a little bit more than you'd expect for an undrafted player. If nothing happens, nothing happens. It's an undrafted pickup, but worth noting at least. But yeah, there's your backfield. Again, they rank, I think, a lot lower than people would expect, at least with the running back grade. The QB run multiplier is damn near at the top of the league, as you would expect with Justin Fields. But yeah, 22nd to 26th ranked running back room might be one of the surprises of this video, and I want to hear what you guys think about my thoughts there. But then you go to the offensive line, and while this group is young and doesn't rank terribly high, 18th for overall offensive line ranking, 16th to 22nd with a C+ grade for pass blocking, and B- grade ranking 16th to 19th for run blocking. So just around the middle of the league for offensive line. While that's not a terribly high ranking, I think that is their absolute floor. There is a lot of hope that they could shatter that ranking this season. And especially looking at this unit for like 2026 and beyond, this is the core aspect of basically what I would be excited about if I were a Jets fan, at least with this offense. This offensive line shapes up really, really nicely. There's just a lot of youth here, a lot of proving for this group to have, and just developing together as a unit. So at left tackle, you have Olu Fashanu, who got out there for the second half of the last season at his natural position at left tackle, as Tyron Smith, kind of as we expected, wasn't able to really go. And he played, I would say, up to expectations as an overall player. You could argue he was potentially a little bit worse in pass protection, though not bad, but he was like a really highly perceived pass protector, but someone that maybe wasn't a great athlete getting off the ball as a run blocker. But I would say he lost a little bit more as a pass protector, not a lot of it, but a little bit more as a pass protector than you maybe expected, but was more impressive as a run blocker than I expected. I don't know if something changed in his technique or if it was just a scheme change coming out of Penn State, but his ability to get off the ball moving forward and his overall athletic profile, I feel even better about that now heading into 2025 than I did with him coming out as a rookie. And I think that bodes well for his overall upside and narrative because I don't really have any issues with what he did as a pass protector. I still saw the impressive technique and all of the range. And I always said he's a great athlete moving backwards and not a great athlete moving forwards. Now I feel like he's kind of a great athlete in both phases, which is, again, I feel better about the overall projection. But going against NFL competition, there were just some losses last season, but overall, like, he was a stable pass protecting left tackle and a pretty solid run blocker as a left tackle in, I think, the 6 starts we got there. When they played him at guard, he definitely wasn't as comfortable, but I think absolutely the arrow is pointing up. This was a top 10 draft pick that was every bit worth it, and there is really no reason to believe that Olu Fashanu within the next 2 seasons can't emerge as a franchise left tackle for this team. It feels more a matter of when than a matter of if, although it's obviously never a guarantee. So you feel really good about the future at that spot. Left guard's a little bit more straightforward with John Simpson, who they signed from Baltimore. He's just like steadily developed as a later round draft pick, but a lot of play strength. He's a tough dude, not the best athlete. So you see some losses in pass protection in that sense. And he can't always get to his landmarks as a run blocker, but he's tough. He's smart, an established veteran at this point. For him to really be, obviously with the youth at tackle, there's no guarantee that John Simpson is the weakest link. But as you project this group out to the future, assuming John Simpson's going to be your weakest link, that's a great weakest link. That's one of the best weak link players among any offensive line in the league. Just a very balanced veteran. So frankly, love what you have there for what he is. And then you have Joe Tippmann at center, who was always going to take a little bit of time. He was really raw as a pass protector coming out, and he's taken his lumps within his first 2 seasons. But from year 1 to year 2, he got better. He was kind of bad in pass protection in his rookie season, and I would say was sort of adequate in year 2. If he can take just another leap there to just be a pretty solid pass protector and continue to show the impressive run blocking coming together for him, he always had the potential to be a really good run blocker coming out of Wisconsin as a good athlete and a tough dude. Joe Tippmann has a lot of upside to be something like a top 10 center. This draft pick has generally worked out for them. It hasn't always been perfect, but again, there's just really no reason to believe that he's not headed on the right trajectory or that he doesn't have the traits to become a really, frankly, good center for them. And then you have Elijah Vera Tucker at right guard. You could even argue that the arrow should be pointing up on him. He finally gets through a season healthy for the Jets last season. I left the up arrow off just because maybe I don't want to be overly optimistic, but you could certainly argue that he's also trending up, that he's heading towards being a top 10 guard in the league. I don't think he's too short of that. You could argue he played like a top 10 guard last season, but whether he gets better or not, for him, like, he's established, man. He's just fine as a pass protector. That's where if you want to say he's not a top 10 guard, it's because of the pass protection, where he's He's a nice player, but he does take his losses. He misses with his hands. He stops his feet at times. You do see some games where he gets beat in pass protection, but as a run blocker, certainly a top 10 guard in football. That nasty mentality that he always had out of USC, it has not gone anywhere through as he's battled these injuries. He's a good enough athlete. He's got great play strength. He can block any system. He's a really good guard, man. And if he continues to get even better as he's kind of heading towards getting that big contract with the Jets here, I think, then great, more power to you. But you don't necessarily need that with everything we've said so far. And another top 10 pick here at tackle in Armin Membu. That was kind of the chalky mock draft pick that he falls to them. They run the card up to the podium and it's like, great. We've already been talking about this for 3 months. We kind of knew they would do this and they made it happen. I mean, everything lines up here. Again, I'll reuse the term, no reason to believe Armin Membu can't be a really nice franchise right tackle, if not one of the best right tackles in all of football. A tremendous athlete, great play strength, super young. Someone that I think mostly got by off of athletic tools at Missouri, but you do see flashes of advanced techniques to know that he's at least working on some stuff as a young player. You want to see him get a little bit more consistent with his hands in both phases. But the potential is there for him to be a tremendous player, obviously being that top draft pick. But he's just got to come out and prove it, right? And I don't think he's going to be a flawless rookie. Most rookie tackles aren't flawless out the gate. There's a lot to learn at this position. But by 2026, can he be a top 10 or so right tackle? There's potential for that to be the case, and certainly by 2027. So I really like this unit. I think there's a dream scenario where this is a top 10 offensive line this season if these development trajectories happen sooner rather than later. But especially as you talk about the 2026 New York Jets, there's a very good reason to believe that this should be a top 10 offensive line kind of by the end of next season. And again, right now, they're already still a solid unit, ranking 18th overall. As far as the depth goes, I would say you have one capable backup tackle and one capable backup center. So Chuck Okorafor, who's started a lot of games for the Pittsburgh Steelers, wasn't really able to go for the Patriots last year, but if he's healthy, you can plug him in there as a backup tackle, and he's an okay option as a backup if he's healthy. Then you're getting into like Carter Warren, who's struggled, Zach Bailey, who has hardly played. Even like Max Mitchell, who's listed on the guard depth chart, he might be your best option as a backup tackle after Chuck Okorafor, but I think they like him more as a guard. But yeah, you're one deep at tackle. That's better than some teams can say, basically. But there's not really any enticing young prospects to keep an eye on or anything like that. But that's because those enticing young prospects are your starters, right? And then Josh Myers gets brought in on a surprisingly cheap deal. I mean, given what some of these linemen are getting paid, I thought Josh Myers would get, starting money, $8-9 million a year. He's not a great player. Green Bay let him go for a reason, but he has started for a long time and mostly been adequate as a pass blocker. Never really figured things out in the run game, to be honest. But as a backup center, someone that used to work with Justin Fields at Ohio State on a 1-year, $3 million deal, there's a lot of value in that for what he's been for Green Bay. And I do think Myers has the size to play guard, and Tippmann can play guard too. So while you're not talking about Tippmann ever kind of coming off that spot of being your long-term center, if it's a spot start week and Vera Tucker misses a couple weeks, for example, you could really shift this thing around, put Myers in there at center and Tippmann at guard, who he's had some experience there, and still feel pretty good about things from a depth perspective. So I do like the floor of this group. And, Max Mitchell has played. He got some starts last year. It was very up and down. He struggles with play strength, but he's a good athlete with some tenacity. So I do like the overall depth as well. They're in that massive cluster of over half the league, ranking 14th to 29th for the skill blockers. Even if you have Alan Lazard in there, who is a good blocking receiver, I just don't know how much he's going to play. as they try to get some of these younger guys involved. And, Mason Taylor, Jeremy Ruckert, Andrew Beck being the core blockers, nothing really to write home about there. So they're in a massive cluster where they don't really get a boost from the skill players. But that rounds out your offense for the Jets. Unfortunately for New York, they do come in as my 32nd ranked offense. But they do some nice stuff in the run game. They rank at least in the top 2/3 of the league there, 21st in run game. Obviously, a ton of potential to be higher than that with run game. The run game coaching doesn't rank out that high. If Engstrand can prove to have some of the creative genius that Ben Johnson brought to the table, that would lift this thing up. If the run blocking, as we just said, can come in and kind of those development arcs hit earlier rather than later, that could be really like a top 10 run blocking unit. And then running back, it's just, I'm not as high on Breece Hall and what that group is bringing to the table this season. But if Breece Hall gets back to what he was in his rookie season, all right, there's crazy potential for this run game, but we are ranking all these units very much near their floor, and I do think 21st in overall run game is much closer to the Jets' floor there. Passing game ranking 32nd, I don't think is terribly surprising with Justin Fields, with a thin group of weapons, with the unproven pass game coaching, with still some room to grow with the pass protection. Like, somebody had to rank 32nd, and I think the Jets make as much sense ranking there as anybody. And overall, that does place them 32nd in overall offense, just behind the Tennessee Titans, by the way, who came in 31st. And overall, our bottom 4 teams in these deep dives, shouldn't come as much of a surprise, are the 4 lowest ranking offenses in the league. But let's talk about this Jets defense, a unit that had, by me at least, and I think most rational people, colossal expectations last season. With Aaron Rodgers coming back healthy, my whole take was like, the offense just needs to be like top 20. And honestly, it was a 20-ish or so offense last year. But the defense went from 3rd in DVOA in 2023 to 20th in 2024. So this team all of a sudden enters with a lot more question marks about it, but it still has a lot of remains of the talent that led to those expectations and that top ranking, top 3 defense in 2023. And a lot of enticing building blocks here for Aaron Glenn to work with. But let's start with the defensive line. This is one of those impressive building blocks here. They come in ranking 11th to 12th for overall defensive line with a B grade. 7th to 11th, though, for pass rush with a B plus grade there. And then a little bit lower for D-line run defense, which isn't a huge surprise for anybody that watched the Jets last season, even if they've made some changes here. A C plus grade there, 17th to 21st. So it's a good unit. And even though they've really found some impressive young edge rushers here, this unit does still very much center around Quinnen Williams. And you talk about this defense being disappointing last season. Honestly, I'll call it like it is. Quinnen Williams' performance last year was kind of a key contributor to this defense taking a step back. He went from really in that category of like dominant number 1. I don't know if he was a full-on defensive player of the year candidate, but he was closer to being a legitimate candidate than he was to not being a true number 1, if that makes sense. Like he was dominant in 2023. And then in 2024, he kind of took a step back to being kind of in that category we talked about, like Jeffrey Simmons, where he's kind of a 1B. He doesn't consistently take over games, doesn't consistently split double teams like maybe a Chris Jones does, or like Quinnen did in 2023, and wasn't as dominant when he did get one-on-one reps as he was in 2023. And even as a run defender, he wasn't as good as the dominant tape he put up the year before. So really a step back for Quinnen Williams. And that makes it kind of tough for me to know what to do with him. Do I put the up arrow on him? Do I do that up and down yellow arrow where it's like he could go up, he could go down? ultimately, I'm pretty comfortable leaving him here with this 86 grade as a superstar player, acknowledging that there is just a year ago a version of Quinnen Williams that was closer to being an elite player. But getting that consistency and getting that player back is far from a given with this Jets team, but it's possible. It is certainly possible. But ultimately, the dude's a beast. He's a two-way, three-down defensive tackle. He defends the run really well. Even if last year he wasn't as good at it, he still was very capable. Basically the only interior D lineman that could get off a block for them last year, and they put a lot of pressure on him to do that. But I do think he can take on double teams. He's not the ideal player to ask to do that because he plays at about 305, 310 pounds. It was better when they had Al Woods next to him. And that's, part of the Derek Nadi signing, right, is to hopefully open Quinnen up a little bit. But as a pass rusher, his combination of power and quickness just is typically too much for most guards to handle. Rip moves, power moves. He is just incredibly capable of getting past pass protectors, obviously. So he's a great starting point for this defensive line. And I do think, it's having just done the Jeffrey Simmons conversation. This is an example of like, okay, if this is the caliber of player where he's a great player, you're comfortable with him as your best pass rusher, as long as you have several other difference-making players on that defensive line to complement him. Whereas the Titans didn't have those difference-making players, I think the Jets do. With Will McDonald and Jermaine Johnson, a pair of former first-round picks in, 2023 and 2022. And there is a ton of upside with this duo as a complement to Quinnen Williams. And it's like, where do you want to start? You could literally pick one or the other. I will start with Will McDonald, who most recently was impacting this defense, to no fault of Jermaine Johnson's, having torn his Achilles last season. But Will McDonald blew me away last season. I thought he was a solid prospect, maybe a bit of a reach with like the 15th pick, the 14th pick. Like they spent a really high first round pick on him. And I just wasn't sure he could return value on that big of an investment. But I think what he showed in the second half of last season was a higher upside, better player than I ever projected him to be at the next level. And again, that's not to say I hated him as a prospect. I had him as more of a late first, early second round kind of guy, and they just took him earlier than I expected. But last season, they were justified in doing that, man, because in the second half of the season, he kind of saved this defense, man. Like Hassan Reddick was giving them nothing. Jermaine Johnson was injured. They had traded away Bryce Huff and or they didn't re-sign Bryce Huff, and they traded away John Franklin Myers. Like that defense was searching for help, and Will McDonald emerged at their exact time of need. It wasn't enough to save the defense as a whole, but imagine if he didn't do what he did, how ugly things could have been. I know it's hard to imagine things being even more ugly than they were for the Jets last year, but yeah, dude, Will McDonald was a constant pressure machine. Really with the starting baseline of what he did in college with that speed rush, really savvy bend, great get off, and just the ability to threaten that corner. And that always just kind of keeps tackles literally on their heels, having to hit that outside landmark to protect against that speed and bend rush. But Will McDonald really got comfortable hitting those inside spin counters. And this was something that Iowa State frustratingly didn't allow us to see because Iowa State played him in that stupid 3-3-5 system where he was playing like as an inside shade of the tackle. So if you're playing from that alignment, we didn't really get to see him constantly set up those speed rushes to the outside and set those wide angles on tackles. But he really got comfortable with that here in year two, where he would threaten the corner if he could win with that bend, get around the corner, swipe at the top of the quarterback's drop, force fumbles, force the quarterback to step up, all that good stuff. If he could do that, that's great. But really getting that tackle to overset and then whipping inside with his quickness on a nasty spin move. One of the best spin moves in the league here already in his second season. And then, dude, like he started to beat some tackles with a bull rush throughout the second half of the season. Granted, they were pretty bad tackles in the reps I saw him win with that bull rush, but if all of a sudden that becomes a complete part of his game, you can literally have whatever you want against offensive tackles. And he could be one of the more efficient pass rushers in the league if that bull rush becomes a consistent weapon for him. I don't know if it can or not at 240 pounds, but the flashes were there. So I'm really excited for Will McDonald. I don't think he's fully there yet as a star. I think he's got to prove it another year and, again, kind of unlock that bull rush before you're really talking about him as more of like a superstar, difference maker, like 1B complement to Quinnen Williams, having that kind of ideal. Like if you say Quinnen Williams can be a 1, but he's more of a 1B and you need another 1B with him, there's a world where Will McDonald can reach that level, but he's certainly not there quite yet. Unfortunately, there is a major drawback with Will McDonald, and this hurt their defense last season. He can't hold up against the run. He's too small to go against NFL offensive tackles. He plays at about 238 pounds soaking wet, and it's just, it's tough at that size to do it, and he can't. So that's why Michael Clemens is here. Big, smashing early down run defender. He is the perfect complement to Will McDonald. So they'll keep McDonald fresh, play Clemens on early downs, and play that kind of rotational game there. And then Jermaine Johnson is more of your 3-down true starter in the sense that he can play the run, has the size to do that, and can rush the passer. And I was stoked to see what his third season was going to bring to the table, because I think he in 2023, he had really emerged as, honestly, like at the end of that 2023 season, he also had reached that kind of, I'll say 2A level to Quinnen Williams being a 1B, if that makes sense. Like he was dominating guys with the bull rush, getting after the quarterback, winning as a pass rusher, and playing run defense really, really well. And then you have high expectations for him last season. In week 2, he tears his Achilles. So it's pretty straightforward, man. He's got the talent, former first-round pick, a great bull rush. There's a lot of kind of like Rashawn Gary to his game, a lot of kind of Montez Sweat to his game. Think of those guys being what Jermaine Johnson could be if he can get back healthy, get back to speed, and get back on track. But it's a tough injury for edge rushers to recover from. Not just to get that first step explosiveness back, but to stay healthy on top of that as well. So it's not a given. If you could promise me Jermaine Johnson just is fully healthy, resumes where he was heading into last season, this group probably cranks just up inside the top 10 for overall defensive line, but a slight ding, waiting to see how he can recover from that injury. But those 3 guys, plus Michael Clemens as kind of the perfect complement to Will McDonald's weakness being run defense, that can really be the makeup of a difference-making good offensive line, even a great offensive line in the league. However, another thing holding them back slightly here on top of some of those minor questions there with Jermaine Johnson's health and Will McDonald, maybe still with some room to grow, even if he's a good player already. But the depth here is kind of hard to look at compared to where this Jets team was a couple years ago. They just didn't really do anything to replenish this group in terms of depth or even find another guy next to Quinnen Williams. I mean, they bring in Derek Noddy on like a 1-year, $1.8 million contract. He's a space-eating, big defensive tackle that can take on blocks. Like, I think literally the one good thing here, we mentioned it, this should open up Quinnen Williams in the run game a little bit more so we can get more out of him there than we got last year. But in terms of Derek Noddy himself being much of a playmaker, not really. Like, he's a $1.8 million player for a reason, and he gives you nothing as a pass rusher. So he'll come off the fields on pass rush downs, and then you might get like a little bit of Michael Clemens as an inside rusher. But if it's not Michael Clemens, okay, Byron Cowart, Leonard Taylor, year 2 undrafted player. Like, wow, this is probably the worst DT2 in the league, I would think. So that's not ideal, right? In time, you're hoping they can find someone there for sure. You can't fix everything in one offseason, but this was definitely one where they're going to kind of struggle through it for a year in that DT2 spot. But yeah, I mean, Byron Cowart has incrementally developed from being a traits-based Bill Belichick pick many years ago at this point. He did the occasional good thing for the Bears last year. Leonard Taylor is the one guy I'm at least interested in potentially becoming that DT2. Had some questions coming out of college in terms of like what the hell happened in his final year after being maybe a projected first round pick. But I still thought was very much draftable as like a third or a fourth round guy. And he got on the field late last season and did some decent things on both, like in both phases. With this opportunity, with this coaching staff, I would love to see it for Leonard Taylor. Pretty raw still, but excellent strength in his arms to shed blocks in the run game if he can develop better technique and discipline, and enough in there to generate a bull rush too. So we'll see. Beyond that, Jay Tufele, Fedarian Mathis, really just kind of draft busts that they're rolling the dice on. Tufele was a 4th round pick, I think, for the Jags. Fedarian Mathis was a 2nd round pick by Washington and was horrible with that draft status. There is some more edge depth there. Eric Watts also can defend the run. He's a big-bodied guy. I stood next to him at the Senior Bowl. That's a throwback defensive end right there. And he did some good stuff against the run as an undrafted pickup last season. So, again, edge depth for run defense is pretty solid. And then they did draft Tyler Barron in the 5th round. You know, once upon a time was a highly perceived prospect with some pass rushing juice, but kind of stalled out in terms of continuing to kind of add to his athletic profile, whether it's size or speed or bend or whatever it is, and just not a diverse pass rushing skill set. So there's some traits there as a 5th round pick, but it was a 5th round pick for a reason. We'll see if they can get anything out of him. And then that's probably it for the edge group, to be honest. But yeah, there's your defensive line. It's a good group with a ton of potential, especially into the future. If they could just get, it doesn't need to be a superstar DT next to Quinnen Williams, but you know, like a Dalvin Tomlinson caliber player in the future, something like that. That would really round this group out for the 2026 version of this team. But this is it's a good defensive line that should contribute to this defense being more than competitive this year, despite being our 29th ranked team in these power rankings. And then you go to the linebackers. It's a 2-man room right now, and it's an undersized room. But my Lord, is it a fast, hard-hitting linebacking duo that wants it. These guys, Aaron Glenn is going to love these guys. C-ball, hit ball maniacs at the 2nd level. They come with their deficiencies. With that lack of size, it's just an okay group of run defense for linebackers, ranking 18th to 24th with a C+ grade here. But it comes with the advantage in the coverage group, 4th to 8th for linebacker coverage, and they ended up my 14th overall group of linebackers, but could certainly finish inside the top 10 relatively easily, depending on what Jermaine Sherwood can prove here in year 2 as a starter. But let's start with Quincy Williams, who has really broken through as just a kind of perennial Pro Bowl caliber linebacker. Puts up a ton of stats with the way he flies to the ball. And he's just a good coverage defender, man, because he's quick and fast to play man coverage, but the way he kind of plays those high lows in the intermediate part of the field, like he's got a good feel for that. So like his zone IQ has impressed me. Just another, like the list, it feels like every deep dive, doesn't it? Feel like there's a former 3rd or 4th round pick, many of which ended up changing teams, but just took 3 or 4 years to figure things out. And that's what happened with Quincy Williams. He's a 3rd round pick by the Jags. 4 years later, he breaks out on the Jets as like a all-pro season last year, and then was still really good last year, despite everything being such a disaster last season. But yeah, just a little bit smaller, 5'11", 230, which isn't egregiously undersized, and he does do a good job of kind of skating around blocks and being savvy in that sense. But at that size, you know, he can get drowned out in the run. Guys will get their hands inside where he doesn't quite have that length, and he can get absorbed a little bit more than some of your bigger linebackers. So I don't know that he's ever going to be this like dominant elite run defender, enforcer type, but he can definitely get the job done as a good run defender and a really great coverage defender on top of that. And then you have Jamie Sherwood. He is more, quote unquote, egregiously undersized. So I am interested to see over time, like, how well he holds up. They clearly like every bit of how he projects and loved the tape last year. And really, he did do a good job against the run, to be fair. And he's another guy that really is savvy to work around blocks. He played safety at Auburn, so he always lived in that world where he was, trying to more dodge blocks and navigate around them to make plays against the run. But there are always going to be downsides to doing that, as opposed to having a thumper in there that can actually make that physical presence happen at the line of scrimmage. But clearly they're okay living in this world, and they're confident in Sherwood. They this new regime watched the tape and gave him one of the top linebacker contracts in the league right now. They're trying to kind of bet on his further development, and get ahead of the potential rise in the linebacker market. But 3 years, $45 million for Jamie Sherwood that's damn good money if you can get it. But I don't fully fault them, man. He's kind of an extension of Quincy Williams. Really, like, these two guys are very similar styles. And if nothing else, I think Aaron Glenn just wants this energy in his defense. Even if, at times bigger fronts are going to be able to get to the second level and drive these guys out of the run game, you love everything else they do. And the energy that they bring to the table adds value in other areas. So I kind of like the bet on Jamie Sherwood, just being that former safety that has figured out this linebacker position. He did, that safety background showed in a lot of his coverage reps, the ability to kind of run up the seam and carry crossing routes. There is a speed element to this linebacking group that you just don't see really with most units in the league. So it's a fun group, though some size deficiencies. But then they did draft Francisco Mauigoa in the 5th round. Definitely brings more size to the table here at 6'2", 230. Pretty raw coming out of Miami, especially in terms of coverage. But, he can thump a little bit more. And the Lions, with this Lions staff obviously coming over, they had a big rotation of linebackers there in Detroit. They're not going to have that here necessarily. Mauigoa is going to have to prove himself, I think, before he really gets on the field and kind of starts to take some snaps away from guys like Quincy Williams and Jamie Sherwood, which you might say, why would you do that? Well, they had good linebackers in Detroit that they would rotate off for theoretically lesser talents, but to keep these guys fresh. And then, if you're facing 12 personnel and it's 1st and 10, maybe you do want to take Jamie Sherwood off the field for more of a full-size linebacker. Like, they were not afraid to do that in Detroit, but he's got to figure things out. But he's probably going to get some opportunities to get that opportunity, if that makes sense. But then Zaire Barnes, Jamin Davis, like, just tradesy projects. Jamin Davis, a former 1st-round pick that's been a complete bust. There's not really linebacker depth here right now. Definitely a unit that, if they do want to stick with that linebacker by committee approach, wouldn't be surprised if they continue to kind of address this room, even if you like your 2 starters in Williams and Sherwood. But yeah, it's a fun group, man. Even if a bit undersized and not, quote unquote, ideal from a run defense perspective. But then you have the Jets secondary. And I gave this group a B+ grade, ranking 6th to 11th as well. Really rounding out, again, a talented defense that has spots of question marks on it. And that's no different with this secondary. There's some potential question marks here. But to me, Sauce Gardner bouncing back and being a top 3 corner in the NFL, I'm not too worried about it. I'm really not. This is a volatile position to begin with. I mean, any kind of all-pro level corner over the last decade in the modern passing era is going to have years where you have some sloppy games, potentially on primetime TV, and lose some reps, and you give up more yards and completions than in your all-pro seasons. This is the most volatile position in the sport. And Sauce Gardner, who came into the league for the first 2 years as the best corner in the NFL, I mean, 2022, 2023, it was Sauce Island, and his shutdown production was unparalleled. last year he was, I don't know, probably like the 23rd best corner in the NFL. But if you really understand the nature of that position, you quickly become a lot less worried about it, and you focus on Sauce Gardner's traits and technique and mentality and length, and you just kind of stop worrying about it pretty damn quick. Now, if it happens again and he's kind of average, then we can maybe have a different conversation next year. But I don't even think he was that bad relative to how people are talking about him out there on the Twitter, on the X. I mean, he still had a reception percentage allowed of 53%, which we were talking about how that, Denzel Ward was at 53% in a really good year for him last year. That's still a good number. Anything under 60, you're still producing at a high level. He only allowed 391 yards, 1 touchdown allowed. Now, he did get penalized 10 times this year. That grabby mentality that he has bit him more this year than it had in previous seasons. And I do think that is a part of his game because he is one of these corners that understands the refs just aren't going to call it every time. In fact, most of the time they're not. So put that hand out there, play physical, and more often than not, you're going to be rewarded for it. Especially with his 6'3" length, he's got easy access to use his physicality to, get in guys' face and again play physical. So I still am a huge Sauce Gardner defender. Have him as an elite corner. Pat Surtain, I think rightfully so, took the crown from him last season as CB1 in the league and maybe knocked Sauce Gardner down from this okay, is he the best cornerback since Darrelle Revis conversation? Because in the first 2 years we saw from Sauce, it was like, this guy does not lose. Well, okay, we saw some more human aspects of his game, but he is still a foundational number 1 corner in every sense of the word. And I'm excited to see Aaron Glenn even weaponize him more in more of a press man system. As opposed to Robert Saleh did want to play in a little bit more of that cover 4 world. Now Saleh would at least let Sauce play press man at times, but he's going to get to do even more of it here, and it's going to be a ton of fun. So huge believer in him, and he's obviously the core reason why the Jets get this favorable ranking with their secondary room. Again, ranking 6th to 11th in the league. That's very respectable. But another big part of that is Michael Carter, who had a complete lost season last year. I'm telling you, throw out the tape from last season. He had an injury that I have heard they should have had him shut it down, and they didn't. They had him played through it, and it was a just bad but wasted season for Michael Carter after he had just gotten extended. And you go back to 2023, he was one of the best cover slot corners in the league. Really quick dude, a ton of speed from the slot to take away all these crossing routes and slot fades that all these teams are running today. He's going to be a good fit in this system. And he's a capable run defender. He's not one of these super big, stocky slot corners, but he plays hard. He works his way around blocks. He tackles pretty well. He's every bit a top 10 slot corner in the league. So he also contributes towards a very favorable coverage grade. And then the rest of the unit, I would say, is just okay, and certainly keeping this group from being a top 5 secondary, especially CB2 or your outside corner in Brandon Stevens. Couldn't believe that the Jets gave him 3 years, $36 million, and 21 guaranteed. This was not just a 1 year, prove it contract with some fake money on the back end. They gave him real money, and I hated this contract. This was one of the 3 or 4 worst free agent contracts of the offseason. He had one pretty good year in Baltimore when that defense was humming, and it was all a lot of inflated ball production as targets were getting filtered his way. And he had a confident run in that 2023 season, but he's not a sticky coverage player. He's not even a great run defender. He's okay. He, to me, was the definition of pick him up at the end of free agency, give him a 1 year, $4 million deal, let him compete for a spot as like a contributor to your secondary. Not, we're giving you money that cements you as our CB2. Like, just a horrible deal. I expect teams are going to target him potentially more than any secondary member in the entire league. And now he's going to a more of a press man system. And hey, maybe turns out Aaron Glenn knows more about defensive backs than me and you want to take his word for it. Fine, I can't really argue with the logic, but there is nothing that really tells you Brandon Stephens is a good press man corner. That to me is a pretty major leap of faith, and I would say the downside is even bigger for him than what was a pretty bad year in Baltimore last year, where Ravens fans were begging for him to get benched and celebrated when he was not retained here. So that one was head scratching, to say the least. And I don't know how quickly you can bench him with that contract you gave him. That's what really frustrates me about the deal. But if I had to bet on there being a breaking point within the next, like, let's just say 20 games into the start of next season, because they gave him so much money that, like, he's going to be in consideration for his starting job next year with how much they're paying him. But let's just say the next 20 games for the Jets, I would bet on there being a breaking point where they just have to bench him, even though they're giving him like high-end CB2 money. Like, they're paying him more than Michael Carter, for example. So really head-scratching, especially when you bring in a guy like Azariah Thomas for a team that's in a transition season, that's building for the 2026 and 2027 version of this Jets team. I think you want to see what you have in Azariah Thomas so that you know for a third-round pick if you kind of need to keep investing in that spot to have a good CB2 opposite of Sauce Gardner. So this becomes a pretty murky situation in terms of when we see Azariah Thomas. Ultimately, like, when you give a guy that much money, I know there's going to be some people that say, well, what does it really matter? You can just bench Brandon Stephens. And maybe they do. Just say, we don't care how much we paid you. We're going to go to the kid. More often than not, that money talks, and that money contributes to decision-making from these staffs. So I'm worried about that. But ultimately, when we see Azariah Thomas in this system, that was another bet that Aaron Glenn and this Jets front office made that a lot of, nobody was really excited about the Brandon Stephens contract, but a lot of people were really excited about this pick for the Jets. Azariah Thomas got some first-round love. A lot of people I'm at a second-round guy. This was one of those prospects that I really pushed back on. I would encourage you guys to go check out my cornerback rankings video if you want an even more thorough deep dive onto Azariah Thomas. But essentially, I am worried about the speed. I am. I think you watch him at Florida State, and obviously an awesome press man corner, and that's the reason Aaron Glenn loves him. He's got length. He does, to his credit, have really quick feet for a bigger guy, which is gonna give him a chance to be one of the best press man corners in the league if everything comes together. Like, he can jam you at the line, but I did see the lack of speed on tape, and then he runs a 4.6. Like, you see reps on tape where it's cover one, and Florida State's not giving him safety help over the top, and average NFL, college football receivers are creating separation on him deep. Now you're talking about him going against NFL wide receivers that can beat press coverage, that have more speed, against passing games that are more willing to look vertically, and now the jury is out that he is a 4.6 speed corner. So this is a cover one heavy system with this Jets team. I'm worried that you essentially always have to give him over the top safety help. And hey, maybe with Sauce Gardner on the opposite side, that's totally fine. And if it's cover one, you're just going to shade that safety over the top and give him help over, against those deep balls. And maybe that's as simple as their plan is, and that will make this thing work out. But I do have my worries. You have got to be able to turn and run if you're going to play press man, cover one. And I would love to be wrong. I don't think it's like an egregious pick or anything like that, right? They get him in the third round. I had him as a late third, early fourth round guy. And if he doesn't work out, like, nothing's stopping you from replacing him. So I'm not here to like slam the pick. It's more just like a lot of people oohed and awed over that pick and over the fit. And there's just not any press man corners in the league today or over the last 8 years, really, that have 4.6 speed. All of the slower corners are off zone cover 4 oriented guys where you have a 10-yard head start because of the scheme. That's not the case here with the Jets. So I got my hesitations on it, but I still might bet on him to be better than Brandon Stevens. So we'll see if and when that transition happens. Honestly, like Quantez Stiggers is still interesting to me. Hasn't really played. He's coming out of college, out of the Canadian ranks rather. But what a 5th round pick in 2023. Good ball skills. I would stack him right up with Azariah Thomas in terms of opportunity to be better than Brandon Stevens, basically. Jared Bernard Converse, okay. Little more of a reach there on just a traits-based SEC corner. And then, you know, that's probably your 6 corners right there, unless Chris Boyd makes it for special teams. The safety room is just entirely adequate, in my opinion. I don't think we need to spend too much time on this group. Tony Adams, as an undrafted player out of Illinois, has carved out a nice role as a balanced, do-it-all, you know, true jack of all trades, master of none player. I expect he gets a contract extension, like, you know, 3-year, $18 million deal, something in that ballpark, and plays pretty well here. I haven't seen anything on tape from him over the last 2 years that leads me to believe that he's going to lose this job to Malachi Moore, who I like, or that he's going to play so bad that he gets benched or anything like that. He's a good athlete. He's got okay instincts. He's a pretty capable tackler, nice balanced floor raiser for your secondary. And then Andre Cisco is a little bit more of a polarizing player where he's got some really ugly moments, whether it's missed tackles or being too risky as a coverage defender on the back end, kind of busting assignments or finding himself out of position, but higher end stuff too, where he is kind of that risky playmaking safety on the back end. You know, I think back to Andre Cisco and Kirby Joseph as prospects, and I think of them as similar style players. And I think they probably see some Kirby Joseph in his game. Obviously, they had Kirby Joseph breaking out in that Lions secondary. So to have a little bit more of a risk taker on the back end could be good, or it could be bad, right? That's the definition of a risk taker. So on a 1-year prove-it deal for a team trying to find some maybe upside in this secondary and answers in this secondary, sure, why not? And the nice thing is, okay, you get to week 12 and it's not a fit and he's gambling all the time, trying to jump routes and stuff, not like Isaiah Rodgers gambling, getting suspended, but, you know, and you decide you want to make a change. That wasn't a contract that dictates he has to stay as the starter. So you could go to Malachi Moore halfway through the year. And I wouldn't be surprised if that happened either, because I loved Malachi Moore, especially for where they got him. Very Tony Adams-esque, honestly, where he's a good athlete. He's not quite as fast, but man, his agility, how fast his feet are chopping constantly, and he's always ready to deploy his next move and cut on a dime or plant before he strikes as a tackler. Like, his foot speed stands out. It helps his reaction time too, because he's always ready to react to the receiver's breaks. But he's a good enough athlete. He's not that big, but he tackles hard. He's got great technique to wrap you up, and he stays square as a tackler with those quick feet. So, you know, I think he's just a really balanced player. And if you end up with Malachi Moore and Tony Adams as just a stable duo on the back end that are, you know, maybe not the most dynamic coverage impact players, but steady Eddies back there in a secondary that has Sauce Gardner and Michael Carter, I think that could play for me too. And then I like Isaiah Oliver. I do expect he'll play in dime packages. You know, you think of what this Lions defense used to do with someone like Ifeatu Melifonwu, who honestly made some really good plays for Detroit before he had a hard time staying healthy eventually by the end of his rookie contract in Detroit. But Melifonwu, like, as that former corner, just kind of as a dime back, an extension of your safety group, an extension of your slot corner room, kind of lurk and make plays and hit you in the run game. The Jets made a decision to bring Isaiah Oliver back when he was an open free agent with this new regime coming in. And I absolutely expect we see 400 or 500 snaps from Isaiah Oliver in their dime packages. And he's another very steady player And I'm happy that they brought him back. And just like total floor raiser with this idea that, yeah, it's just kind of adequate. And hell, he has experience playing outside corner too. Maybe he gets involved in that room too, but he's really fell into this role as this kind of nickel back overall in the last couple of years. Yeah, that's pretty much it. You got Jalen Sampson is a super lightweight athlete really in the secondary. We'll see if they can find a way to use him. He really is stuck. If he ever emerges as a player that gets on the field, he would really be stuck as a passing downs only dime back type of role because he's like 175 pounds. But yeah, that rounds out your secondary and really rounds out a defense here that should be pretty damn good this year, right? Like they finished 20th last year. I do think they'll be better 15th this season. I just think the talent base is too good to finish 20th on defense again. And I think Aaron Glenn will at least like elevate the run defense that was such a problem for this team last year. And they do still only rank 25th for run defense. They are still a lighter, thinner front, right? Like they don't really have any defensive tackle depth that you feel good at all about defending the run. And that matters for D-line run defense. Jets learned that last year. They're thinner at linebacker. They've got to prove that they can come out and do it. But I do think like C+ grade, 25th for run defense, that's still probably better than they were last year. And then you can find yourself in more pass rush down situations where you can start to tee off and build this pass defense back up too. So as I've said, we rank these teams at their floor heading into the season. Even if they finished 20th last season, I've got them at 15th for overall defense, 12th at pass defense with all that talent on this side of the ball. But yeah, I mean, the Jets could absolutely be a top 10 defense this year if Aaron Glenn comes in and does a good job, and if some things go in the right direction as well. You know, most notably being those two edge rushers, right? Like if Jermaine Johnson can get back full health, and if you get another step forward from Will McDonald, it would go a long way. I think they're always going to have like some slight deficiencies with the CB2 spot and some of the lack of bodies to defend the run, but defense is not the problem for the 2025 Jets. It's much more about that last ranking offense needing to show us what they can do. And maybe just a touch of bad special teams here. So they actually come in 30th for special teams with a D+ grade. I know some people are confused because the Browns were 30th. I'll be honest, I either missed that they moved on from Morstead or they did it after I put the initial rankings together. So as I was preparing for the Jets, we readjusted for Austin McNamara's grade as the punter here, which ironically actually came out higher for how I do it. Basically, if you haven't played, I take your 2-year average on your PFF grades minus 15 points, and that actually ended up higher than where we had Thomas Morstead. So the Jets ever so slightly went from 31st to 30th. Just a reminder, sometimes you do see some subtle tweaks in these rankings as the series goes. I can't account for everything, and depending on when they moved on from Morstead, sometimes there are roster moves that make some changes like that. But anyway, back-to-back deep dives. We have our 30th ranked special teams. The Browns will fall to 31st. Ultimately, to take a look at the formula there, they were kind of bottom third or so of the league for both PFF and DVOA. They were 22nd in PFF team grade last year and 24th for DVOA. They have major questions at kicker as they're going to presumably roll forward with Anders Carlson, which I just cannot believe an NFL team is rolling forward with Anders Carlson in the year 2025, but here we go. What could go wrong? We mentioned the punter actually coming in 20th. That's complete up in the air, though. Austin McNamara, I think, was maybe edging out to get the Commanders job a year ago. Didn't get it. Now he's slated to be the Jets punter. But he was a good punter in college, for what it's worth. The returner grade is pretty good because Kane and Nwangu on the kick return side of things is arguably the best kick returner in the league. Feels like he gets a touchdown returning kicks every year. So that's great, but not really much from a punt return aspect. So that kind of meets in the middle. Basically, to get a 90 grade, you have to be great at both kick and punt returner. If you're just very vanilla at both, you get a 70 grade for me. Great at one, vanilla at the other is an 80 grade for the Jets for the returner grade. And then the overall coaching culture, their benefit of the doubt slider is going to hurt them as well as an overall team and for the special teams formula. Being tied for last there with the Cleveland Browns. So again, 30th ranking special teams, 15th on defense, very respectable on that side of the ball. And then that 32nd ranked offense. It had to be somebody. It came out the New York Jets. I don't know that that's overly surprising. Jets fans won't want to hear it, but it does leave them our 29th ranked team for our power rankings. Just to recap some of their strengths and weaknesses quickly. For strengths, I did put both pass rush and the overall coverage, including the linebacker coverage, which is excellent bones of a good pass defense. And then the QB run game factor is, even if they rank 32nd for overall offense, their style of offense could give some teams fits depending how disciplined and deep they are against the run. For weaknesses, though, quarterback is a weakness. They have one of the worst starting quarterbacks in the league and certainly one of the worst from a passing perspective. Ancillary playmakers, if you've got a good corner to deal with Garrett Wilson, or if you want to double team Garrett Wilson, I don't know how many other options the Jets are going to have in the passing game right now. And then D-line depth is very concerning. That really contributes towards that 25th ranking, run defense overall that we had for the entire team, and a lower ranking run defense for the D-line in general. There are some wild cards here that are critical factors that can help the Jets exceed this 29th ranking. I would say the biggest of which is if the upside hits early on the offensive line. It's still a young group, as we talked about, but we feel at some point that's going to become something like a top 10 offensive line. What if that's week one? What if Membu is just Tristan Wirfs is a rookie and Olu Fashanu is awesome here in year two? Tippmann takes another step forward and they're smashing guys with a Justin Fields run game factor. All right, then we can start talking about this being more of a potent offense, at least having an elite thing that they do well. And then you pair that with my other wild card. Okay, as low as I am on Breece Hall right now, what if I'm just wrong and he's fully healthy, a year now removed from his injury in 2023, and he does get back to being more of a superstar running back? All right, you pair that then with the offensive line. Dude, this could be a top 3 run game in the league with a great defense. That can climb the rankings pretty damn quickly. I mean, all these teams at the end of the day, there's only a couple things splitting differences between these teams. So there is upside in that sense with the run game. And then just all of the coaching and culture, right? Like, what if Aaron Glenn does come in, bring the kneecap biting mentality and fix the culture? And what if Tanner Engstrand is a really good play caller that learned from Ben Johnson? What if Aaron Glenn is a elite defensive coach? Like, dude, that can really help some of how we're calculating all this stuff that led to the Jets coming in as our 29th ranked team. But let's take a look at their schedule before we get to the interview with Connor. So their Vegas over-under is 5.5 wins, and their schedule's not terrible, especially compared to like Cleveland that we just looked at. Cleveland had a brutal schedule. I think the Jets, as far, relatively speaking, is a manageable schedule for them. Love that we start with the Aaron Rodgers rivalry battle. If you don't think the NFL knew Rodgers was going back to Pittsburgh, you're kidding yourself, because the ratings are going to be great on that one. They do have some really tough games with Buffalo and Tampa, but the meat of their schedule is like practical with a combination of challenging games and winnable games. Like they get Dallas at home, Carolina at home, Atlanta at home, Miami at home in that division. They get Cleveland at home, which I think they'll be favored in. Like that's a good kind of healthy heart of the schedule that should allow them to kind of keep the season rolling and not let things get off track. I think you can pick up some wins in that stretch, even all the way through the end of the season, frankly, because you got at Jacksonville, at New Orleans, New England at home. Like, again, it's not a horrible schedule. You've got your Buffaloes in there. You got to go to Cincy. You got to go to Baltimore, hosting Denver. Like, there's definitely some challenging games on the schedule, no doubt. But things could be worse. My math actually had them coming out at 6.2 wins, which is higher than their 5.5 win total. I'm probably staying away just because I'm just not a Justin Fields defender. And I did just get so burned by the Jets last year that I don't think I can bring myself to bet a season higher win total on them. But mathematically speaking, with this schedule, it's not the worst bet if you really do believe in maybe Justin Fields a little bit more than I do. Be careful with that, but I could see the argument for it. But there is your Jets outlook. I think most people are treating this like a transition retooling season. Certainly some exciting aspects of this football team, though. And as we've discussed, some room to go a good bit higher than this 29th ranking here. They're not going to go win the Super Bowl, I don't think, but could end up being a pretty frisky, competitive team with a great run game and a great run defense if things do go really well for them. But do not go anywhere. You are crazy if you go anywhere. We've got ConnorJRogers joining the show to talk some Jets here. Just an absolute blast of an interview. We talked some Jets and went off the rails with some fun conversations as well. So I really hope you guys enjoy. And by the way, if you are not familiar with ConnorJRogers, friend of the channel, but doing just incredible work basically everywhere. He's with NBC Sports covering college football. He does the Fantasy Football Podcast with Matthew Berry. The NFL Stock Exchange with Trevor Sikkema. You can find him talking Mets. ConnorJRogers on Twitter. Huge thank you to Connor as well for joining this show here today. And we are now going to roll the interview. All right, Connor, I got to be honest. I, as a lifelong Aaron Rodgers fan, gave the whole Jets fan thing a try for like 2 years. And I think I'm good, man. I think I'm going to tap out. You can take it from here. Jets fans will just have to thank you for your sacrifices. Thank you for coming on to talk Jets today, man. It's good to have you.
Oh, it's great. It's always good to catch up with you, man. I give you a lot of credit, even just being like willingly taking on a side fandom and choosing the Jets is quite the haul, I would say, quite the weight to carry. And it's good though. You got a taste of, like, imagine a lifetime of this. I'm 33 years old. Somehow they are actually a pretty big part being / living doing Jets pre and post game, which is amazing. Even when the team is terrible, it's such a fun show to do. Where it's like it becomes part of your personality when you just talk to anybody out in the open or whatever it is. It's amazing. But man, I often say to my Badlands co-host Joe Caparoso, and he always says it back, like, what would things be like if they were ever a playoff team? I was in college, freshman in college, when they were, so we don't know.
The Rex Ryan days.
Yeah, the back-to-back AFC championship games.
Well, and it's crazy, like, just in the 2 Rodgers years, I feel like I got the whole spectrum, packed into 2 years, where you have the 1 year where it's like just the big injury ruins the season. Right. And then the next year, it's just random disappointment that the season's just a complete mess. But that does take me right into my first question for you here. Is obviously the offensive struggles and the Aaron Rodgers of it all was very well documented on a macro scale with the Jets. But I think the defensive struggles were just as big of an issue for the team last year, if not an even bigger one. They go from 3rd in DVOA defense in 2023 without Aaron Rodgers to, with Aaron Rodgers, 20th last season. So what to you were one or two of the kind of core issues that led to that defensive fall off, and what maybe could be different either staff wise, scheme wise, or personnel wise with the 2025 Jets?
It's a really important thing to bring up, and I'm glad you started with it rather than, hey, why didn't it work with Aaron Rodgers, which is a good conversation to have. But I think that what people miss nationwide with the Jets so often, and something I'm still not really confident in going into the Aaron Glenn regime year one, I think it'll be fine by year two, is that it's hard to envision them or being competent in them to stop the run. The Jets, what they're really bad at is dictating the flow of the game. And that is because they can't run the ball and they can't stop the run. Now, I think they're going to make a significant effort to be a run heavy and semi-efficient run team this year offensively, because the personnel just kind of is set up better for that, quite simply. Like, we'll get into the Justin Fields of it all, but it's bigger than that. The 5 across on the offensive line, drafting the Mason Taylor. But the defensive side of the ball, the fact that the Jets, it felt like, weren't able to control the clock with the ball. And then when the defense gets on the field, which felt a little too often, it felt like there was just way too many second and third and manageables for teams because of the Jets' inefficiencies in defending the run. And it is a blend of everything last year. The personnel was not only poor, but played irresponsible football. It was a lot of mercenary, I don't know if it's bounty hunter is the word, but like lone wolf style guys up front. And that is Javon Kinlaw. That was Hassan Reddick. That was the loss of Jermaine Johnson. Jermaine Johnson tearing his Achilles in the second game of the season. Really, the Jets were set up a certain way, right? Where in Robert Saleh's defense, the front four was allowed to be more aggressive than almost any front you'll see in the NFL. And the good side of that is you can pin your ears back, get off the ball, and wreck plays. The bad side of that is when you're irresponsible against the run is you start to double down. You saw guys just overshoot gaps, lose contain. The Jets were not only bad at stopping the traditional run game, they weren't good at containing quarterbacks and keeping quarterbacks enclosed in the pocket. So outside of Quinnen Williams, there wasn't many capable run defenders on their defensive line playing with their hand in the dirt. Will McDonald had a phenomenal second-year season as a pass rusher. He had double-digit sacks. He's still a mediocre at best run defender. And with Will McDonald, you drafted him to sack the quarterback, and he's done that.
Happens when you're 235 pounds.
Right. And he's slowly bulking up. I think he's going to be a little closer to 245, 250 this year. But you're right. Like, he's drafted because he is an excellent pass rusher. And his job in the defense isn't to be this stalwart run defender, but the other guys that you expected more of in that area and the loss of Jermaine. The Jets went through this transition period where they went from having John Franklin Myers, who's now with the Broncos, a guy you could play up and down the line of scrimmage, Al Woods, a rotational nose tackle, and Quentin Jefferson as well, a guy that gave you a little juice in a rotational role. All of these complementary pieces to Quinnen Williams, who's phenomenal. Then when you look at it last year, teams figured out, why would we not just allocate our attention to Quinnen Williams? And the Jets play with smaller, faster linebackers when CJ Mosley was hurt, which CJ Mosley was hurt. So it was Jamie Sherwood, Quincy Williams, who are good players, but they need space to operate. So the Jets ran into this double-edged sword of they weren't properly coached to stop the run. And the players, the personnel, didn't play well at all. And they didn't play responsibly and disciplined as well. And it led to this absolute disaster. Now, why I'm not confident it's just magically fixed this year. Schematically, I think it'll be better. But the personnel is not that drastically better. They didn't go into the draft looking for defensive tackles. They didn't spend a ton of money on that unit in free agency. So they're expecting the return of Jermaine Johnson and just better coaching to turn around some of this roster, and the departures of Hassan Reddick and Javon Kinlaw, who I cannot understate, were truly terrible NFL players last year. The fact that combined, I think they collected more than $60 million in free agency, which goes to show you how awful NFL free agency could be. Good for them, by the way. Like, great for them. If you can get that kind of money, it's almost nobody in the NFL actually watches the tape.
It does feel like that at times. I mean, up to Dan Moore, we just did our Titans deep dive. It's like, oh my goodness.
The second richest Dan Moore.
Dude. Yeah, what's
There's a CEO out there in the world.
Yeah.
Because I sit on Stock Exchange. I was like, that's great Dan Moore money. Like, he's probably the richest Dan Moore, and he's not. But he's really rich. He's in the bracket of very rich Dan Moores.
It's one of the best bits you guys have done. I think it's good. All right, so you mentioned it a little bit, but Justin Fields comes in as the quarterback. It's like the third straight offseason where I'm at it with the Fieldies out there. Feels like it's
He has
been
a
a lot
rabid
of
fan base.
It's unbelievable. It is unlike really any like wave of fanhood I've ever witnessed.
What's the cross sport comparison? I don't know if I have one. Like where
Oh,
there's just all these
geez.
fans just hoping that this is the guy, and you're just like, I saw the flashes. I don't really have a good cross sport comparison. Oh, I think I have one in baseball.
Maybe like who's the Simmons, the basketball player?
Oh man,
Ben
Ben
Simmons.
Simmons. Oh
Yeah.
god, I don't know if he has fans left, but that's definitely possible. Luis Robert on the White Sox. Everybody thinks he's going to be like an
Yes.
MVP every year, and he's just not good. So
Another Chicago guy.
yeah, there you go.
Yep.
So maybe they're
Yep.
used to
That's
it.
a good one. That's a really good one. But where are you at with Fields in the year 2025? Are you still attaching yourself to some hope that maybe this could be like a Sam Darnold type of season and he has a future with the Jets? Or are you just purely looking at him as a bridge only option into a future QB?
It's funny how this has been analyzed, and I think you kind of just answered it in the second part of that question. I often see this analyzed as is like an all or nothing. Like the Jets are going to win 3 games with Justin Fields, or they, in the most unlikely of places, found their franchise quarterback. And I think it's okay to look at it for what it is, and the money tells you exactly what it is. It always makes me laugh. Like the money in the NFL sometimes lies to you. Justin Fields' 2-year contract tells you exactly what he is. And that is a bridge quarterback. Yeah.
It's the Gardner Minshew contract adjusted for NFL inflation.
I mean, yes. It's telling you that you think he's a guy that you can win games with and start for you, but not a guy that you think is going to drag you to wins. And the reality is a lot of the great teams in the NFL all have those guys, right? I feel like the one that's on the line, and he almost is now underrated, is Jared Goff, where like people don't look at Jared Goff as a guy that drags his team to wins, but the Lions are really, really good. And I think Goff is better than that, but I understand not putting Goff in the bracket of, even not Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, or anyone like that, but not like Jaden Daniels after the rookie year he had, guys like that. So I get it.
Yeah, the tier 2. He's flirting with the tier 2 with like Stafford and Herbert.
Is Dak in there when healthy? I think so.
I think yeah, it's tough because the injuries and everything is kind of derailed it. But I think he had just kind of gotten in and then it fell off quick. But yeah.
Yeah. So with Fields, it's just he's obviously not in that tier, but he is somebody you can win games with if you set things up the right way. And the Jets, what people aren't giving the Jets enough credit for, and I see this as a not only draft analyst, but also Jets draft analyst, is that the Jets just punted on this quarterback class. And I always say, put yourselves in their shoes. They're a new regime. New regimes almost never have to take a quarterback if they don't want to. You could even, look at the Bears. You could even just sit there and be like, if we have the number 1 overall pick, Mike Borgonzi didn't have to take Cam Ward. Cam Ward just, in my opinion, warranted being taken by the Titans. But the Jets were sitting at 7, and they're like, so do we have to take Shedeur Sanders or Jackson Dart and sell ourselves that that's our hope? And if those guys fail, which the odds are likely, unfortunately, that they're not going to be game-changing quarterbacks, that we're fired, because that's how it goes. So they signed Justin Fields to a very manageable deal and said, let's try to look respectable, build this culture back up, and have an infrastructure in place so that when we do put all our chips in on a quarterback class, that player is not only even walking into a more established place of comfort rather than being a savior, but also, is probably just a better player than what was available to them this year. That's the way to look at the Justin Fields situation. If it gives you anything more than that, you pointed to Sam Darnold last year, the resurgence of Baker Mayfield, who, the thing is that's weird is Baker was just a better prospect than Fields, and nobody really ever wants to say that.
Right.
Like, that's my problem with that one. And
Darnold was too, in my opinion.
Darnold,
I was higher on Darnold.
For me, that was closer. I was actually lower on Darnold, but I get it, right? And the problem with both Darnold and Fields is ironically, usually between the ears in terms of processing speed and And Darnold, this gets enhanced in Minnesota's offense. I'm curious to see how it's going to be in Seattle this year. And that's Fields. Now, Fields gives you an absolute different dynamic as a runner that the Jets plan to. Aaron Glenn is very intrigued and invested in the idea of a quarterback that can truly threaten the game with his legs, because Glenn, as a defensive mind, thinks that's the hardest thing to defend when you have everything in your arsenal. So they got the discount version of that in Fields. I don't think we're going to be talking a year from now. Like, if you and I are having this conversation and I had to pick one scenario that happens, I would say the most likely scenario is the Jets have Fields on the roster and he's probably going to start the year, but there's probably a quarterback, a first round kind of quarterback that they want to take over at some point. So would Jets fans love it if it's like Fields was too good, we're going to run it back with him in that second year? Then great. I don't think Fields will be that. I also don't think he'll be bad enough that they just cut or trade Fields and do anything else. So it's okay to just, in this instance, very rare to say this to the NFL, this is the one instance where it's kind of fine to just be trying to tread water to being semi-competent after how bad things were.
Yeah, I definitely reached a point in that last year in Chicago where my perspective on Fields just totally changed from like exactly as you've put it. Like, we definitely see him eye to eye here, where it's like he kind of is what he is at this point. Like, you stop imagining that the speed of the game is finally going to slow down for him and that he's going to unlock all these traits, but you do at least have a floor with some of the stuff he does bring to the table if you scheme it up correctly. So yeah, the contract they gave him, not addressing quarterback in this draft, you nailed all of that, I think. And you were telling me before the show that you and Trevor are doing your QB rankings on the NFL Stock Exchange. So Jets fans, if you want to find out about the 15 next potential Jets quarterbacks,
top 15s. Yeah. It's crazy, man. Like, I've seen tweets from some big accounts too that are just assuming next year is going to be so much better. And I watched 18 quarterbacks and that was not my takeaway at all. It could be, but like, think about like what you're up against. Cam Moore did go number 1 overall. If Arch isn't in the draft, there's no guy that's just this lock to be the number 1 overall pick. So it'll be really interesting to see where
the sense I get though is there's a large pool of just raw talent, and there's been every year other than the Kenny Pickett year, it feels like there's been a guy that breaks through, whether it's Cam Ward or Burrow or Jaden. So I think the hope is there's a big enough pool that at least one of those guys will do that. But yeah, if that doesn't happen, it could be the case where there's just not a guy. So definitely looking forward to hearing you guys break that all down. But I wanted to ask you about Breece Hall next. I watched him last year as a resident Jets fan. Again, no longer going to be staking my claim with the Jets, but I don't know. I left pretty disappointed in what I saw with the eye test on Breece Hall, and I wanted to ask you if I'm crazy to kind of be afraid that we're seeing something similar to what happened with maybe Javonte Williams, another second-round pick that had a great start to his career, but then got hurt and maybe slowed down a little bit. I didn't see the juice really from Breece Hall, and I'm a little worried maybe that he isn't what people think he is. What do you think about that take?
I don't think it's ridiculous at all. I mean, here's the timeline with Breece Hall, right? In the last year, he mysteriously wasn't doing anything during OTAs, and nobody really raised a flag about it, like a red flag. I remember he was on the bike a lot, and it was kind of like one of those, they're just kind of taking it easy with Breece. And it's weird because his last game before that, the final game of the season, the 2023 season, Breece Hall like single-handedly sent Bill Belichick out sad. Like, the last image, and for all the haunting of the Jets Bill Belichick did, Bill Belichick's lasting NFL image is that he's on the sideline in a blizzard with the hood literally covering his face, and Breece Hall has like 40 touches and no one's tackling him. And their Jets are it's just embarrassing way to go out. And we were sitting there at the time like, okay, this is a meaningless game. Why are we just running Breece Hall into the ground? But damn, Breece Hall finally looks really good.
Yeah.
And then flash forward a couple months, he's not doing anything at OTAs. I don't remember exactly camp, but I feel like it was a little up and down. And then the season was just more of the same, where he never really The difference with the Javonte thing is there were glimpses last year. Like I remember a couple plays against the Steelers where I was like, whoa, a couple plays against the Bills. But man, you're right. It's got to be health because he just doesn't consistently look like the guy we know he could be. And here's the reality. Isn't the team telling you the same thing right now? Breece Hall was a second-round pick. He's already in a contract year. This is year 4 for Breece Hall.
Is this year 4? Oh
this
my
is
God.
year 4 for Breece Hall. So this is year 4 for Breece Hall. He's in a contract year. You hear constant buzz about Garrett Wilson and Sauce Gardner and potential extensions. I'm not saying they're going to get done. It's pretty obvious the Jets are very interested in getting those done. Those guys have 50-year options. The Jets are operating with more urgency for Garrett Wilson and Sauce Gardner, who are under contract beyond 2024, than they are for Breece Hall. And I think part of that is the market where, say, Breece Hall finally has the year we've all been dreaming of. You just tag him. That's the running back market. It sucks for running backs. Say Breece Hall repeats last year. The really weak part about that is you're not going to get much for a compensatory pick formula because he's a running back, but you probably just let him walk.
Yeah.
I think it's clear the Jets know something, and I know it's a new regime, but the Jets know something with Breece Hall that there's a reason why these little rumors get out that they would move him before the draft. And he's, Robert Saleh never criticized anybody at the podium. It actually drove us insane. He would criticize Breece Hall. It was the one guy. And you just sit there and be like, that's the battle you're going to pick right now with this team.
Yeah.
So when all of that's going on, and Breece Hall is not a bad guy, let's make it, when it's not that, there's not a character problem, you kind of just default to that the guy's not right physically. And hopefully this is the year that he gets right physically. This is the best offensive line he's going to have in front of him. But I'll leave you with this, Marcus. Owners meetings, the media sitting around Aaron Glenn. I wasn't at that, but I watched the video of it. They ask Aaron Glenn about Garrett Wilson. He goes on and on about Garrett Wilson. We got to feed him the ball, all this, just Garrett Wilson. They ask about Breece Hall. Aaron Glenn goes, we have 3 running backs that are going to play. The juxtaposition of those answers was so glaring to me. And I believe him. I think Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis are going to get some kind of work. And I believe him that Garrett Wilson is going to get 80% of the Jets' targets.
Yeah.
It's very, very telling of where things are.
Hey, being Justin Fields' number 1 wide receiver is a good world to live in. Just ask DJ Moore, because he is basically the only wide receiver he's going to have eyes for.
And they've already played together.
Well, that's also true. Absolutely. Yeah, the chemistry is going to be perfect. I always go at it with Bears fans because I was like, funny how Darnell Mooney left after being a wide receiver too, and then just looks really good again now that he has a quarterback that'll look at him. Anyway, don't need to just trash on Justin Fields, but I do want to get to some draft questions here. I want just kind of your quick, heavy hitting Sauce Gardner analysis, because he had a bit of a down year last year. I think whenever a guy is really at the top of the podium and then comes down a little bit, you're going to be, a lot of eyes are going to be on you, and you're going to get a little extra criticism. I guess my question is, how confident are you that Sauce Gardner can still be a top 3 corner in the NFL? Because I think we probably both agree he wasn't last year, but was in the first couple of years of his career.
Is there a better coach in the NFL for him right now than Aaron Glenn? I mean, it's going to be full sink or swim time for Sauce, and his sink is what we saw last year. He's just more of an above average-ish corner. Yeah. His swim is first team All-Pro, which he was his first 2 years in the league. The reason Sauce's down year gets magnified, and I don't disagree with, I think this is fair. He was a horrendous tackler last year. And when he had some bad moments in coverage, which felt so rare compared to the first 2 years, it was oh, wow, Sauce got beat there again. It felt like he'd point at someone else, and that just does not sit well with anyone watching. Aaron Glenn is going to be on top of this guy and challenge him to actually shadow number 1 wide receivers, which is something Robert Saleh's staff would never do. So yeah. I think I'm pretty confident Sauce is going to be a really, really good player, a top 3 to 4 or 5-ish corner in the league, and challenge again to be an All-Pro. But he's got to be a better tackler, and I think he's got to add more on his plate, and that's exactly what the staff is going to do.
Nice. Well, I guess we can piggyback right off of that as we get into some draft talk here. and just go right to Azariah Thomas, sticking in that cornerback room. So when they took him, I was not surprised at all because he is absolutely an Aaron Glenn style with the press man and all of that. But I'm actually pretty worried that he can hold up with 4.6 speed in that type of system. There's just not a lot of corners that lack. Well, let's just put it what it is. With a 4.6 40 time, that if it matters at any position group, I would say cornerback, it does. All the 4.6 speed corners in the league today are more playing that off zone kind of, Fangio Sala branch of scheme. They're going to ask him, I think, to come in, play cover one press man coverage. Am I crazy to think that they're maybe actually buying a little bit too much into what he did well in college, or are you just not worried about it with him? How'd you feel about that pick?
I was probably highest on this pick compared to mostly everything else they did. And I agree, like usually slower corners, I just am out on. Even like Kamari Lassiter scared me, honestly.
Yeah.
He's been good. So I think it was interesting when Glenn called him, he said to him, he's like, "You gonna come here and choke receivers out?" And that's exactly what he does. He just beats you up at the line of scrimmage. Why I'm confident in it is this is somebody at 20 years old the night he was drafted. Over the last 2 years, he's already played over 300 snaps in man coverage. Like Florida, you watch all these corners, guys that started for 4 years might not even have that snap count. Like you said, they're sitting in zone, they're playing off. Like you watch Azariah Thomas, he was asked in an awful, awful Florida State team to be on top of receivers, beat them up, not let them off the line of scrimmage. I actually think on tape, he looks pretty good when he opens up and runs. It's not like a 4-4, 4-3 kind of corner, but he's not slow like on tape consistently. So I think for Glenn, he'll understand the speed aspect of it and what you can ask of him and what you can't. But I think Thomas is a really, really good prospect that, you got to realize too, where he's going. He gets to play in a defense with Sauce Gardner and Michael Carter that he's typically going to have some of the more like matchups that are more tailored to what he could do. He doesn't have to go out there and run with Tyreek Hill the entire day. He doesn't have to go out there and match up with Khalil Shakir. Like it's going to be matchups that kind of fit his skill set a little better.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm totally prepared to just be wrong about this. Like I'm not the first guy to just go bet against Aaron Glenn. But I do think like now the book is out on the 40, whereas in college, like I thought there were a lot of reps where it was cover one, he was in press, and then the receiver would kind of start to stack him deep, but the college QB just wasn't looking that way because it's college football. I'm a little worried against NFL offenses. It's like the Darius Slaytons and Marquez Valdez-Scantlings of the world that scare me with him a little bit. But I'm excited to see him play. What about Mason Taylor? How high were you on him coming out, and what are your expectations for him?
I think I had him, like 6 or 7 spots later than where they took him. So it was kind of exactly what I thought. I thought it was getting a little crazy town when you heard before the draft he could sneak into the first round. I was like, I thought he was a jack of all trades, master of none tight end. But the ceiling of that is 20-year-old draft pick, getting bigger and stronger each year, got a lot better from 2023 to 2024, good hands, gets off the line of scrimmage, and the blocking is growing, not even year after year, but kind of week after week. And then Glenn shouted out his blocking in OTAs already. And they know exactly what they're getting with him, with his family. Jason was on the Jets during the Rex Ryan era. So I think that it's one of those picks where I've seen it get a little over glorified, where I'm like, guys, don't expect Mason Taylor to be like George Kittle or like that. But it's such when you look at this offense from a schematic standpoint of Tanner Engstrand and how they use their tight ends, they had to have this player. Like they could not go into the year, run this offense with what they have on the roster and Jeremy Ruckert and Stone Smart. That's like, they could not do it. So I think Mason Taylor will just be one of those rock solid players that ends up being on the Jets for, 7 years or whatever it may be, and catches what comes his way and isn't this overwhelming blocker, but is completely adequate as a blocker. It's what you want in a second round pick at that position. And I thought it was one of the times like Membu where they just nailed a need and a value, like even, where the rest of the board I thought got a little crazy.
It just hit me. Is it possible he's the only person in that building, or at least the last person in that building that was there for a Jets playoff win?
Yes, the most recent.
Yeah,
Like obviously Glenn was actually on the Jets when they were in the playoffs.
Glenn was on the Jets. That's true.
But like the most recent one, yeah, there's tons of pictures of him with Jets stuff, face paint.
Yeah.
Like as a kid, he's in Hard Knocks. The Rex Ryan 2010 summer Hard Knocks, 2009 is when it was filmed.
Oh my God.
He's in that with his mom. So yeah, it's makes you feel old and it's kind of crazy, but
I know.
he like you asked the question the right way. Out of everybody on the 53-man roster, Mason Taylor, the second round pick as a 20-year-old, can relate to a Jets playoff appearance more than anyone else on the 53-man roster.
Unbelievable.
That is exactly right.
Oh man, I know we're getting old, man. I saw a picture of RBT at the College Football 26 showcase, taking pictures with is it Ryan Williams, the Bama wide receiver?
Yeah.
He's wearing a Halo 3 shirt. RBT is. And I looked it up, and Ryan Williams was born 5 months before Halo 3 came out.
It's really, really weird. When I do these combine interviews one-on-one with these guys, like I'm not a old 33-year-old. I still play video games. I keep up with music, but I'm not like that cool. I'm not like a 17-year-old. So there are times where their interests are just so wildly different that it's mind-blowing because they all grew up as little kids, like with a phone in front of their face.
Right.
And where it's translated is 90% of them are comfortable being on camera. And sometimes they'll sit down because you don't always get guys that were at big programs and they'll look at me and they'll be like, this is the first time I've ever, been on an actual like TV-ish kind of thing. Sure. And then they're great. And you say after, you're like, dude, you're great. And and they're like, I was nervous. You realize that they're just so used to this with the phone. It's completely changed our entire society in an interesting way.
Yeah. Yeah. All the Skype college courses and all that. Yeah, for sure.
TikTok.
Yeah. So did you have a favorite and a least favorite day 3 pick from their draft?
My favorite was Malachi Moore, the safety from Alabama. Yeah. I think the Jets safety room is in rough shape. There's a world where in October or November, he's just out there starting and you're like, oh, wow, there's Malachi Moore, who is the classic, not explosive or fast, but was so smart in Alabama's defense, finds a way to make a play on the football, just does everything like a sound with technique and discipline and awareness. And honestly, the reason he's the answer, he's fine. I think he can transition into a spot starter or maybe even a starter. I thought their values on day 3 just didn't line up with what Arian Smith in the 4th round was shocking. You look at the 2 defenders they took from Miami. It was a little surprising, and you look at Tyler Barron, the pass rusher. I thought he'd get drafted, but I know it would be in the 5th round. I didn't think he was a great pass rusher in college. He doesn't defend the run. So I thought their board got a little wacky on day 3, and it showed the inexperience of a new regime.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see it. And the transition, right? Like you probably have old scouts still in there.
It was all old scouts.
Yeah. So yeah, it can be tough. Love the Malachi Moore shout. Just like watch the dude's feet, like the agility and the sense of just foot speed. Like he's always ready to cut and redirect, even if he's not fast or even the most fluid athlete. Like that's what always stood out to me was the agility from him. So I was a huge fan of him.
Good call out. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And the way he can like plant before he tackles, like he just strikes you right before he hits it. He's really, really nice player.
They were a terrible tackling team on the back end. Terrible tackling team. So I think they valued that with him. They, that reliability with him, and then hopefully Cisco can find the ball and create some takeaways that they couldn't get last year. That's kind of how they plan on changing the safety room a little bit.
Yeah. Potentially the last opportunity to get a Nick Saban DB in your NFL locker room.
That's right. And like a true multi-year Nick Saban kind of DB.
Yeah. Not you were a redshirt freshman when Saban was in his last year. Yeah.
The Jets it seemed like just were going by Saban values of the draft. Did you hear his Mason Taylor comments after Taylor? So I guess Saban was on the desk when Mason Taylor got picked, and he went on this whole long rant how he almost said it's the biggest regret that he ever had in recruiting was not getting him.
Wow.
And I was like, man, Mason Taylor
That's a
was
big
pretty
statement.
good at LSU, but it wasn't like Lamar Jackson at Louisville, where everyone's like, how did this happen? It was very funny to me. I'm like, damn, he really likes Mason Taylor.
Yeah, that's pretty nuts. All right. Okay, so I just want to wrap up. I've been doing this for every guest, and I'm going to keep track of the guests' overall record for predicting their team's win total. So they're 5.5 wins, and you get to pick over under.
I have them at 7 wins this year.
Okay. All right.
Which, you know, win totals are always funny. This really can matter, though. It's happened to the Jets a lot the last couple of years. Like one missed kick or weird bounce. You know, they could be a 6-win team. They could be an 8-win team. I think that now it's 5.5, but I always tell people it's really 6 because if you bet the 5.5, the odds are so ridiculous. You're making, there's zero value. Like the odd totals are really odd, like weird to bet because if you bet the Jets to win over 5.5 games, you're getting almost nothing back.
Sure.
So if you take the alt of 6.5 is where it actually makes some sense. And that's risky. Like the Jets are not a lock, obviously, to win 7 games. Vegas is telling you that. I think, though, they can find their way to 7 wins. If they won 6, would I be shocked? No, but I like over 5.5. I think they're going to win 6 or 7 games this year.
All right. Sounds good. We'll tally it down and we'll contribute it to the guests' predictions. Awesome, Connor. This was super fun. Everybody, make sure you're following Connor at ConnorJRogers on Twitter. What do we got? The NFL Stock Exchange on NBC.
Summer scouting,
college football.
Yeah. You covered it. Go Mets.
Fantasy football happy hour. Busy man. So thank you for taking some time to come on. This was a ton of fun. Anything else before we get out of here?
No, thank you, Marcus. I'm sorry we lost you in the Jets fandom. I will reserve a rare seat for you to come back if they make the playoffs. You could simulate the dreadful 8th rebuild they've done in the last 15 years. And all I ask is if they make the playoffs, just give me one like, hey, I hope that Garrett Wilson scores a touchdown today or something. We'll be good.
That's the hopes.
It's a low bar.
Hope for the best, expect the worst. I still got the shirt, so I'm ready.
Yeah,
I'll be there.
That counts.
I'll be there at MetLife in January for the Justin Fields playoff debut.
Not a good place to be. Not a good place to be. Bad wind,
it
bad
beats
weather.
Minnesota.
That's fair. That's fair. You have that right.
Yep. All right, Connor. Thank you so much. Everybody, thank you for watching, and we'll see you later. And that is going to do it. Thanks again to Connor Rogers for talking Jets. Had such a blast in our conversation. I hope you guys enjoyed that interview and enjoyed this deep dive. Let me know your thoughts down below. If you think I went wrong on any of my analysis on this Jets team, what are your expectations this year? Do you think they go higher or lower on that 5.5 win total? And who do you think comes next with the 28th ranking in this deep dive series? Let's hear it all in the comments down below. Or if you just want to come and remind me how wrong I was on this team last year as well. I deserve it, let's be honest. But thank you so much for watching. Please do hit that like button on the way out, and I will see you for the next deep dive. Cheers.